My name is Grant Cameron. I'm a private investigator. For the past 38 years, I have attempted to focus on what the highest levels of the U.S. government, military, and intelligence agencies know about the UFO phenomena. I'm the director of the President's UFO website.
Brace yourselves, space enthusiasts. Today, we've got the ultimate UFO expert, Mr. Grant Cameron, in the studio. Back in 1975, he saw something in the sky locals called the Charlie Red Star. Now, he's on a mission to unravel what the big shots in the Washington establishment and the White House know about UFOs. Mr. Grant Cameron has made over 20 trips to the National Archives, digging through presidential UFO secrets. Imagine him grilling Vice President Dick Cheney about UFOs. Talk about cosmic interviews. And that's not all. He has scored over 1,000 pages of UFO documents from the Clinton era with a FOIA request. And he's even got 100 more requests cooking from the Clinton Presidential Library. Mr. Grant Cameron has authored many books in regards to the phenomena and phenomenology. We're very excited to have him here today. Once again, this is your host, George with a G, aka the Legend of Honolulu himself. I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to my incredibly awesome UAP Society co-host. You have the floor.
Hello, my name is Christian Ramirez. I'm with the Transcendence podcast, and thank you for being here, Grant. I just want to start off by formally thanking you for the 2013 mock hearing that happened with a lot of heavy hitters, Dr. Stephen Greer, Dr. Roger Lear, Dr. Thomas Vallone, and that hearing, I feel, is the starting point, at least in my opinion, for this being taken more seriously and providing a lot of different evidence from multiple different countries to show that this isn't just an American government, American phenomenon type thing. That's actually the video I direct people to so that people could better understand what's really going on.
And Mr. Cameron, on that note, the first question I have for you, in terms of everything that's going on here in America, as well as what we see around the world, for instance, with the Mexican Congress with their UAP hearings that they've had, about a month or so ago. What do you believe in terms of the current political atmosphere or the political aspect here in the United States of America and also in Canada in regards to the topic of UFO disclosure? What insights have you learned throughout your decades-long research in covering aspects of the phenomena in regards to why you think governments may be attempting to control the flow of information about the reality of the UAP phenomena?
Okay, well, that's a big topic. Let me do the Canadian first. The Canadians are supposed to bring out a report, public report in the spring of next year. I'm getting ready to attack it because it's going to be a whitewash. The Canadians in 1950 already stated, they wrote a top secret memo in which they said, we were told by American officials, flying saucers exist. It's the most highly classified subject in the United States. Small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush are trying to figure out what's going on. The subject is of tremendous significance to the Americans. We're also told by American officials that mental phenomena may be involved. They're not doing very well because they've said if we're working on the problem, they're willing to exchange credentials and talk to us. So a top secret memo in 1950, the Canadian government does not deny this document exists. Everybody's sort of known this right from the word go. Nobody takes this document very seriously, but right from the word go, it was game on. I think the disclosure problem in the United States is going to come down to classification. I did a posting on Twitter where I talked about the high cost of disclosure. That basically we have a situation where Congress has now got a hold of this thing and they're going to try to force this thing out. And you have a situation where the Russians and the Chinese are sitting on the sidelines and they're watching what's going on. And I've always said this is what this whole disclosure thing is about, or the whatever you call them, the legacy programs or whatever, the people that run it. It's a game of cards. We want you to put the Russians, put your cards on the table. Let's see what you got. Chinese, everybody's waiting for someone else to put their cards down. We have a situation now where the United States of America is being forced to put its cards on the table. This is the attempt. I don't know whether it's going to work or not. And Putin and Xi are sitting there on the side just laughing. They're just waiting to see what happens, because we have no disclosure whatsoever from Russia or China. And they've both been working on the problem for as long as the Americans have. They've both got hardware. They both got crashes. And so this is one of the problems that we have, that the legacy program basically says. We went through a number of things that I went through in my career. One was talking to Dr. Eric Walker. Dr. Eric Walker was came through the Canadian documents, the top secret document. We discovered him. He was former president of Penn State University, had 14 honorary doctorate degrees. And he said exactly what George Bush supposedly said to Jimmy Carter: curiosity is not sufficient need to know. And Walker basically asked us the question. He got very upset a number of times, and he was talking in rhymes and riddles. But at one point, he said basically the old analogy: so what happens when you catch the car? The dog is chasing the car. What do you do? What do you do if the dog catches the car? What are you guys going to do with it when you finally figure this thing out? And he basically said, admit it. You're curious. Admit it. That's all you want. You're just curious. You want to know because you're curious. Why should we spend the time and the money to satisfy your curiosity? And it's this idea that curiosity is not sufficient need to know. So what you're going to have from the legacy programs is, we don't care who's interested in this situation. We are trying to figure this thing out. My bottom line is, I don't think that they understand what people think they understand. The basic situation, my assessment is basically what Jim Semivan says. Because they've got hardware and bodies, yes, they've got hardware and bodies. Because they've got hardware and bodies does not mean they know what's going on. Just because you got a body, like, you can't tell, is this extraterrestrial, is it interdimensional, what the heck's going on? And that's why you'll see all the government statements, whether it's NASA or whether it's this Kirkpatrick guy, they basically say, yeah, UFOs exist, and we've got no evidence that it's extraterrestrial. I'm one of the people, Jacques Vallée basically started this, Keel was part of this. A lot of people have gone down this road. I'm joining the crowd that says, I don't think this is going to be ET when it comes right down to it. It's way more complex than that. I point out to people that if you look at David Jacobs' information, David Jacobs would deal with the abductees, and they would have this thing where the alien comes like this far away from the person's head, and he looks in their eyes to read their mind and stuff like that. And David Jacobs would always ask him, is he breathing? And the person would go, no, not breathing. And this is the key. When you start looking, the aliens do not breathe. If you look at the alien autopsy, which is supposedly based upon actual film, they did a recreation, but it was based on actual film. Take a look at the body. The alien autopsy footage has no belly button, has no nipples, has no sex organs, doesn't eat, doesn't drink, doesn't sleep. People that have confronted the alien, for example, my friend Sherry Wild says to her being, Da. The publisher picked up on it. The publisher said, hey, he said Da is from, he said he's from Andromeda. And she said, yeah, that's where he's from. And he said, well, he's a Zeta, right? She said, yeah, he's a Zeta. Well, then he's from Zeta Reticuli. He can't be from Andromeda. What the hell's going on? She said, ask him. So then next time he comes, then she goes, so what's the deal? Are you actually an alien? And he said, no, that would not best describe who I actually am. I'm an etheric being on a mission through the cosmos for the creator. So that's what I think the bottom line is. This is a higher form of intelligence. It's the spark of the divine. Everybody has a spark of the divine. We're these sort of etheric beings. They're playing aliens. We're playing human beings. When you and I die, say if we were to go for a car ride, and you and I both died today, we'd float out of the car, and we suddenly realize, like, oh my goodness, that was like a dream. We weren't, that was puppets. We were playing these puppets, and the puppets will die, and we'll go into the next life. And in our next life, we won't even remember this life. We won't even remember this thing. We're all concerned about this life. We won't even remember this. And that's sort of the bottom line to me. I think we're dealing with an intelligence that is a higher level. Everything comes down to consciousness. I've gotten a number of messages. The first message I got 2012 was the idea, you wanted to know what that Charlie Red Star thing was about? Because that's what happened in 75. I saw it the first night. flew right in front of the car. Like, we're not going to let this guy know that this guy's going to know for sure this is for real. I've never chased sightings. I've never been interested in sightings because I was close enough that I had no doubt what I was looking at. This was not anything on this world. And the second night it came at me and it sort of flew away back in the same direction it came. And if you've listened to the Skinwalker, if you listen to Colton Keller, he tells almost identical story. He says, I'm sitting at Skinwalker Ranch and this object comes over the ridge and it's moving at the speed of an F-18 jet fighter, but with no noise. And it comes and it does a hairpin turn right above my head and goes back where it came from. And so the question is, what's really going on? Why is the UFO? This is the questions people forget when they have UFOs. Is they ask a question like, how like what kind of G forces are they doing? How do they propel this stuff? And nobody asks the simple question is, why does a UFO come in and do a hairpin turn over someone's head and fly away? Why do UFOs do 90-degree turns? Like what? Would the guy suddenly figure out, oh, I forgot to get the wife's dry cleaning? I gotta, why is it doing a 90-degree turn? Why are UFOs dropping like the Nimitz? Everybody has this thing about the Nimitz, and nobody really asked the question. Like, it drops from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second. Like, what's that all about? Why is it doing that? Nobody asked this question. Like, what's really going on? I even posted, and it's gotten a lot of attraction today. I said, everybody's now disclosed that, yeah, UFOs exist. Now, why are they here? Nobody asked that question. Nobody's trying to figure out, like, what's actually going on here. Everybody's just into stories. And it's like I've actually posted, I brought up the fact that a 2-year-old child has an attention span between 4 and 6 minutes. People on the internet, look it up. Attention span 8.25 seconds. And so you see people scrolling through Facebook, and everybody's just, oh, that's a neat sighting. Oh,
That's true.
And nobody's really trying to figure out what the hell is actually going on. What's this thing? What's the message? Why are they here? So that's where I've sort of gone, and I've gotten messages. I've gotten the lightest one I've got is basically I get very concerned. I get very sort of into it, and they basically said, "Chill, man. We know how to land a plane." And I was like, I knew exactly what they're talking about. It's like, and that's what Jim Semivan says. He was asked by John Alexander, if you know the story. John Alexander was very skeptical, and he said, "No, I don't think the government's got a program. No, 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 no." And then Jim Semivan said, "Yeah, yeah, this is for real. They're running this thing." And then John Alexander says, "So who's running it?" And Jim Semivan said, "They are." And that's what you got to remember. Whatever this phenomena is, whatever this intelligence is, they're running the show. We're standing on the sidelines, and we're just watching. I don't think we have a clue what's going on. We have bodies and crafts, yeah. But in terms of this thing, it's got to do with consciousness. Jim Semivan even said he's the guy that I think you got to listen to. This is one of the high-level people that had the UFO briefing. He's the guy behind the whole disclosure. He's the guy that dropped the story to the New York Times. He went to the top 3-level agency guys. He was a high-level CIA official. He said, "You guys can't get this out. We're going to drop this thing. We're not going to release classified material. We're going to drop it." And they dropped it to the New York Times. And that's when the whole UFO disclosure story took off. And that's what he says. He says, this whole idea that he doesn't think it's a threat. And he says this whole idea, people think all we got to do is put the dots together. And he says, and this is the key. He says, I don't think there's even any dots to put together. I'm not even sure there's any dots to put together. There does not appear to be any there. This is not as simple as ETs getting lost in space and ending up here. You take a look, even the latest, if you watch the latest Lakatsky, I say the latest interview that Lakatsky did with Colm Kelleher and George Knapp confirms a pile of stuff I've been saying for at least a decade. And one of the things that Lakatsky said, and this one kind of shocked me, I always said no two alien sightings are the same. If you take a look at grays, and you take a look at Betty Hill's gray, Betty Andreasen's gray, take a look at Whitley Strieber's gray, and you start putting them side to side, they're not even close. There's no two aliens look the same. And what Lakatsky said, the whole OSAP thing with the 200,000 sightings, every single sighting is different. And that changes everything. Like, what is really going on here if that's really true? And this idea that there's no threat. And when I just wrote a book called UFO Sky Pilots, and Lakatsky confirms this. He says UAPs, when you come right down to it, is a technology that involves physical and psychic phenomena. And that's what the whole book is about, UFO sky pilots. All these people started to come to me. And the question is, did they come? There's nothing on the internet. These people started coming to me and telling me they'd flown the craft. And the first woman was in her 70s when she told me this. I'm going, are you insane? Like, they let you fly? Come on, they let you fly the craft? And they all say the same thing. You go into the craft, the craft is alive, it's conscious. You touch something, and then you become one with the craft, and whatever you think is what the craft does. And you can go from this side of the galaxy to the other side of the galaxy instantaneously. It's within you. Imagine where you want to go, and you think about it, push the button, and you're there. And so this is this whole thing, this connection between the consciousness factor, and Lakatsky confirms this. And yet, when I looked at it, when he said the 200,000 sightings were all different, and I was always fighting the aliens, so I went back, and sure enough, the story is the same. You're on a craft, and this is like a 747 United Airlines pilot, retired U.S. Air Force colonel, a lot of women. But the story was, the craft is alive, you touch something, and then you become one with the craft, and wherever you think is what the craft does. But no two people touch the same thing. One person touched the ball, one person touched the panel, one person touched a panel on the wall. People sit in the end of a chair, put their fingers in the end of a chair. And I realized all 36 stories were exactly, no two were the same. And I'm going like, what's the chances of that?
That's
And
what I
this is this
found.
whole idea. So I think the idea is that we are part of it. It's like a dream. Yeah, everybody has dreams, but no two dreams are the same. No two leaves are the same. No, on a tree, no two people are the same. Even identical twins have different fingerprints, uniqueness, and we're part of the whole thing. That's, I think, what people are sort of forgetting, is that we're part of the phenomena that we're looking at. And that's what Kit Green says when it comes to aliens. He says that you can have two people in the same experience. And I've talked to people, the Mount Shasta, when I did the books on Mount Shasta about the portals, people would say they have 7 people inside the portal, and everybody has a different experience. And Colm Kelleher talks about an experience at Skinwalker Ranch where they're all looking through Gen 3 night vision binoculars as this thing comes over the hill, and then they compare notes at the end of the night, and all the reports are completely different. We're part of this whole thing. So the bottom line, and you can ask your next question, is this thing is very, very complex. The more you look at it, the more complex it gets, and the less physical it becomes. So at the end, I would say it's going to be way less physical than people think it is. It's going to be way more spiritual than people think it is, which is really going to upset people. It's going to be at least 1,000 times more complex than people think, and it will not have a hint of capitalism. Those are my 4 things that I say you're going to get at the bottom line. But in terms of what it is, it's just a higher form of intelligence. It's vibrating higher. We can get into that field. I've written a book called Contact Modalities, how to get in the field and pull that material back. They're up in this field, a higher level of reality, almost like we're at the bottom of the ocean and it's all dark. And from time to time, say, Christian, you sort of learn how to meditate, and you sort of float a little higher up, and suddenly you see, oh, there's fish, and you're getting closer to the light. You can see the fish, and then you go back into the dark and say, oh, I saw these fish. And they go, oh, come on, you did not. And that's the whole deal. We're all in the water, but people are at different levels, and they're at a little higher level than we are in the water.
Exactly.
And we can get material from them. So that's the bottom line of where I think this thing's all headed. And I don't think the government knows as much as people think. There may be 1 or 2 people that know, and they like, for example, they've got bodies crafts, and they know, as Lakatsky pointed out, that there's a mental phenomena component to this whole thing. It's not simple ETs coming here through time and space.
Agreed. And I just want to say, my research, I never thought it would take me into the UFO phenomenon. And I just had a weird experience. I had an out-of-body experience. Once you have one, you're like, okay, this is real. And nobody can take that from you. And I had a weird dream that told me, I don't know how else to explain it other than it was like a download, look up near-death experiences. And this was random in my life. It just randomly happened. And I started looking up near-death experiences, which led to hypnotherapy. And I noticed, I was like, how is it possible that you have near-death experiencers describing the same things that abductees are describing in regression therapies? And it's about consciousness. And that's one of my main points too, that people don't really connect that. That's kind of what I try to do, to connect the dots for people. But you're right, people do mainly just care about like stories and things like that. And my next question has to do with something that I didn't even know you were involved with, one of those people, Ricardo Gonzalez. and Mount Shasta. And I thought that was pretty amazing. I haven't read the book yet, so if you know if you don't want to divulge certain things from the book, I understand. But what can you divulge about that event, and or what do you know about this? From what I keep getting everywhere is there seems to be some kind of timeline on this, and I don't mean a timeline based on what the governments are telling us that they want to happen. It seems as if it is some kind of outside influence because sightings, things are just seem to keep perpetuating, and it's people are seeing more and more of these things, more and more in the media. Abductees are mentioning this time frame. Dr. Greer has mentioned this time frame. After I made a post about the 2026 2027 time frame, the same night, and I don't believe in coincidences, I'm reading a book by Chris Bledsoe, who abductee phenomenon, and he had mentioned, and I'm quoting, that the being had told him when the red star of Regulus aligns with just before the dawn in the gaze of the Sphinx, a new knowledge shall come into the world. And he says, I'm not sure what that meant, but I have come to understand around Easter 2026, there will be the end of an old way and the beginning of a new. And other people are mentioning this. Former CIA John Ramirez had mentioned that this time frame was real. And I've had some of my own personal strange validations we can get into later that have told me the same information. But I wanted to know if you knew anything about that or how it relates to the Mount Shasta incident or if anything was divulged there.
I actually had a vision earlier this morning. Let's see, what can I say about it? Either it was about my personal life, which is a mess, or a storm is coming. There's this discussion that there's going to be a release between spring and summer. Looks like it may be tied into the re-election of Biden. That sounds like there's something going on behind the scenes. They're gonna tie this thing in. The problem I have is that the number one message I think the beings are putting across is the whole mystical message about oneness versus separation. Are you part of the one, or are you, as the vision was given to me last night, a little 3-year-old kid hiding behind your mother, hanging onto the hem of her dress, all scared and afraid and believing in separation.
Right.
And I've heard the stories about this release, that there's going to be an opening. To me, it's the world is going exactly the opposite way. It's more separation, more separation. You have, the United States of America. I've said numerous times, the United States of America used to be the greatest country in the world because it was the United States of America. It is not the United States of America anymore. It is not united. And that's what you get, is you get the separation. And that's where I've heard the visions that something's going to happen. 26. My reservation is always like, are they going to actually allow us to have something, technology, where we're going to go and spread it to another planet?
Right.
I mean, we are like a real sad
Yeah.
example of how the world is sort of coming apart. The vision I got was like, there was no detail to it, but it was horrendous. It was like high emotion, and it was like, turn it off, I can't take it. That sort of thing. Then again, everything is experience. So it really doesn't matter whether the world ends or what happens. You and I are going to live in whatever world we have. So we're inputting stuff. So if we don't brush our teeth for 20 years, 20 years from now, our eating is going to be a little more difficult than normal. You create and you sow what you reap. That type of thing. That we're building this thing, but we're going to live through whatever it is. And I'm a big Michael Newton fan. The idea that we agree to come here, we agree to do things, so that the idea that you have the visions and I have the visions is not random. You set it up for yourself to
Right.
bring a message or whatever. I firmly believe that's actually going on. So I'm influenced by that. Now, as to the Mission Rama thing, that's where you come into this idea that people will say, well, there's this outside force that's doing stuff, and we always have this separation thing. There's them, and they're doing something to us, and it's like, no, there's just all us. We're creating this thing. And so I always say to people, so they say, well, there's the grays. And I go, if you have been in this game as long as I have, you realize one key thing about the UFO field is it changes all the time. The accumulation started in 67, and then they haven't happened for a number of years. You may have the odd cattle mutilation. It doesn't happen anymore. Crop circles started in 1982. They really don't happen anymore. You used to have UFOs with windows in them. There's no UFOs with windows in them anymore. It's like they're doing this and they do this and they do this, and it keeps changing and changing. Now it's all orbs, and the phenomena is sort of leading us through this sort of stuff. And people will say, no, the grays, all this sort of stuff. I said, no, grays. I published the girl who had the first gray encounter, Nancy Tremaine, a couple months before Betty and Barney Hill. She did 2 books. She investigated this. She had all the transcripts of her regressions and stuff like that. There was police involved. She got all these people, their testimonies and stuff like that. And there was no, I say there's no grays before 1961. There was no reptilians before 1980. They're just changing this stuff. And anybody who believes that there are these sort of like the grays are running the show, all you have to do is go to the Mission Rama. You're talking about the Mount Shasta thing. That's Mission Rama. Started the year before me, 1974. 2 brothers. It was like a contactee type thing where they were all going on board the ship. They were going through these what they call Zendras. We call them portals. And there's 25,000 of these people around the world. And I tell people, if you think that the reptilians and the mantids and the grays are running the show, I absolutely defy you to go to Mission Rama. They record all their encounters. They have encounters all over the world. Some of the best story, I'll tell you the best story in a second. The best story I've ever heard in terms of dramatic UFO stuff is theirs. And I defy you to find a reptilian or a gray or a mantid. No, they're all human type beings. They got long hair. They're all like Michael Phelps, the swimmer. They're all muscular. They're wearing these tight outfits, and they're all beautiful. There's 33 of these beings, and they all have the same hair. They look like they come out of the Barbie movie, and you see this thing. But what are the Mission Rama people? They're all Latino people. They're all like Roman Catholic, all very religious. When you go there, you go for an event. And Ricardo Gonzalez has an event, and so does Enrique Villanueva and I've been to both their events. I wrote a book about one event when I was there, and then I went to Enrique's event and I wrote a book about his event and what happened when I was there. And these people are, meditating, and I asked both of them, I said, when did you start meditating? And they go, about 14 years old. And they go, nobody in America meditates on their 14-year-old boy meditating. They're completely different. And so when you go to these events, they call them program sightings. And the one I actually went there where the being sent a message. It came through my assistant's cell phone. We were going across the Nevada desert. It's a 3-day drive from where I am to Mount Shasta. And it said, Antarel's got a message for Grant. And I go, Antarel's got a message? Because I got one from Chris Bledsoe. And I go, Chris Bledsoe, I was like, guess what's the message? What exactly was the message? And said, we know Grant's coming to the mountain, and there's going to be a program sighting Saturday night, and they wanted me to post it on Facebook. And so I said, I put it up, and I thought I was going to be open one of these portal Zendra things, and I was going to go to the portal, and I started fasting and do all stuff. But when you go to these events, basically what you have is this sort of like they're oming, they're meditating, they're doing yoga, and it's like, I told the one guy, I said, man, you're doing this exercise thing in the morning. If it was night, I would have taken off. I would have gone home. There's no way. I mean, but it was daytime. I couldn't embarrass it. It was just horrible to me. It was like, I was like a total different world. But that's what they do. They try to raise the vibration of the group. And then the beings, their idea is the beings lower their vibration and they meet in between. So I did the one book on Mount Shasta where I talk about Enrique's event up on top of the mountain, but the one I think you're referring to is that I do the 2014-2015 events at Mount Shasta where they open a Zendra. So from time to time they'll open these Zendras. There's actually one from Uruguay. If you look Zendra, spelled with I think it's with an X, I think. They pronounce Zendra, but they open these things. And there's actually one, they photographed it. It's on the internet. But anyway, I heard that they had this event there, and I was with Paula Harris, who was involved in both these events going inside this portal Zendra thing. And I said, Paula, where did this thing happen? She says, we're right over there. And we're on Mount Shasta, up at what they call the Sand Flats, up 4,000 feet up Mount Shasta. And I said, over there? let's go over there. Can you show me? And so we were walking across this sand flat area where there's no trees and across the field. And then she shows me. I said, "Well, where was Zantarelle standing? He's standing right there. See that tree?" And I'm filming this whole thing as she's telling this story. And what happens is that uh, in Ricardo had opened these things 2 years in a row. And so he said to Paula, "They're here. They want you. Are you ready?" And she's freaking out, and she doesn't want to go. She's scared. And they take the 7 people, and she describes being in there, and this being is standing there. And I started interviewing. When I talked to Paula, I said, "Hey, Paula," and he said, "Well, this guy was there, and this person was there." And I said, "Well, are they here?" And she said, "Oh yeah, they're all here." And I said, "They're all here. Let's go interview them." And then we went. They're all sitting in a group, and they had to see me coming with the camera, and they all just scattered because they say, "Well, we're Latino people. We don't want to be the center of the attention. We're just ordinary people, and we don't want to be, proud and stuff like that." And so these people who've seen Antarell 5, 6 times, they just don't want to be interviewed. But we got some of them on tape, and they basically, and they all say the same thing. "So what do you see?" "Oh, he's Antarell standing there, and he's very stern looking, and he was 10 feet tall, and there was these 2 shorter beings beside him, and there was these beings behind the trees with these little iPads that they believed they were the engineers that were keeping the Zendra open." And I'm just like, wow. It's like they're all telling exactly the same story. And then except for one, and this is where you get this idea that the story, everybody sees a different thing. So I was told that everybody got a different message from this being. It was like this person was hearing the guy talking some weird language, and this person was getting a message about something else. And it was like all 7 people were having a different experience, and they're all standing in this sort of a Zendra. And then in 2015, he comes as a hologram. So it's the same Antarell, but this time he's like a hologram. You can see the trees through him, which indicates like the beings are changing. They can appear as whatever they want to appear as. And so I'm talking to the one guy, and he was a military guy. He was in the U.S. Navy for 24 years, and then he retired as an architect in Los Angeles. Didn't want his name released. He said, I'll lose my job if anybody knows. I was just a translator. I didn't even intend to be in there, and I just ended up in the Zendra because I was a translator." And so I said, "Do you see Antarell?" And he said, "Yeah, I saw him." And I said, "He was a hologram?" "No, he wasn't." I said, "Well, yeah, that's what everybody else said. He was a hologram." He said, "Look, it wasn't a hologram." I said, "Well, that's what everybody said." He said, "Look, I was close enough. I could see the lines in his face. He was a solid being." And that's the whole thing. So people were seeing different things. But you get these events where people, it's almost like the floating in the water, where people learn to do this. They learn a protocol that may have been taught to them, like Stephen Greer was taught his protocol, and the beings in Peru were teaching people how to do this the Mission Rama protocol that they use. And so I started getting very obsessed with this whole idea about portals, because what I say is, I don't think the government understands 100% what's going on. But what I've discovered in my research over the years, every time I go after anti-gravity, it doesn't go anywhere. Every time I go after portals, I suddenly end up with something where it's like, I wonder if this is for real. It's like you get these stories. I can tell you some of them, but I want to tell this last story. So the best UFO story I've ever heard, and people just sort of ignore it, or they don't really pay attention because they're into the evil aliens, and they're into Skinwalker Ranch and stuff. 2020. So this guy who's a translator, he's only in one time, 2015. He is a translator. He's inside this, and there's supposed to be only 7 people inside the Zendra. You don't take 7 in. There's 8, so he was in there in this thing. He sees the being, and he describes to me. He gives me a 2-hour interview, as long as I don't release who he is or whatever. And he tells me the whole story of what he experienced and stuff like that. And what happens is he has the hitchhiker effect. And it's like, if you mentioned the fact that there's a crossover between out of body experience, and there is. People inside the craft will say, "Hey, I got to see in 360 degrees." And I go, "Hey, that's out of body. That's out of body." Like, they're talking about out of body, and they're describing it as being on board a ship. But anyway, so this hitchhiker thing, it follows him home. And so you get the skinwalkers. So they'll say, "Oh, there's these evil things and these blue meanies follow these people home," or whatever. And to me, it's like, you are reflective of what you have. So when these 3 guys at Skinwalker Ranch take this thing home, I kept saying, "Hey, are these guys armed? Were they playing hunt the Skinwalker?" Because it's reflective. So you say, we're gonna hunt this thing down. I even heard an interview was done today. We're talking about that. They went back to the command post It's like it's like a military thing. Yeah, they were special forces guys, and they were armed, and they were on this thing. And so it's like the phenomena says, oh, you want to play Hunt the Skinwalker? We'd love to play Hunt the Skinwalker. You want to play Hunt the Skinwalker? And it follows them home, and it has this very negative type of effect.
Mhm.
In fact, it was said those that were the most aggressive to the phenomena had the worst experiences. And Brandon Fugel, who has the ranch right now, warns everybody. He said, it is reflective. Be careful of what you think when you go on the thing, because this thing will reflect. If you want to play Hunt the Skinwalker, it'll play Hunt the Skinwalker. So this guy takes it home. But of course, it's not an evil thing. It's just this weird thing. They're playing this weird game. They want to get your attention. That's what this is all about. They're doing these weird things. Like, why is there a dog man standing beside a fence smoking a cigarette? They want you to go, what the hell is going on here? And they want you to, they want a weird story. They want everybody to tell the story. They're just doing really, really weird things to get people to talk. And eventually everybody's trying to figure out, what is this? What's going on here? And eventually everybody figures it out. And it's, it's just them doing these weird things. So anyway, this guy that follows him home, and he says, I'm sitting there, and he says, my wife phones me, her car breaks down, and then they like to play with cars. And so he gets the car fixed and gets it home. And then she comes in and she says, oh, you're Martians. They're playing with the car again. He said, they're not Martians. She says, well, yeah, whatever they are. They're playing with your car again. And he goes into the garage, and the car is off, and the windshield wipers are going, and the water's shooting up, and the windshield wipers are going. The car's turned off. He's going, well, like, what the heck? And he has to actually let the battery run down to stop it. He can't turn the windshield wipers off. So they do these weird things. Then he's at a birthday party, and he suddenly looks in the corner, and nobody else sees it. And Terrell's this 10-foot being standing in the corner. So anyway, this thing follows him home, and then he starts getting messages. And this is what happens. It's like a hitchhiker. It goes from one person to another, falls, and people start having experiences, and they start getting messages. And so he says he gets this message. It's a long story, but anyway, he's told to appear at Mount Shasta in 2020. This is when COVID's taking place. And a being by the name of Adama, same thing. Looks like he comes out of the Barbie movie. He's got this beautiful, he's gorgeous looking guy with long hair and very muscular and whatever. And Adama says, if you show up, I will show up. You want 111 people, I think. And I will show up. But they only had about 40 because of COVID. But they're sitting there, and it's the last night. And they get this being on film. I don't know if you've seen this. I posted this. They get this being on film that's against this tree, and you can see sort of like a portal in front of the tree. The tree is all sort of weird thing in front of the tree, and they pick it up. They're filming, and then as the camera comes back, they pick it up again, and it's moved to a different tree. And there's a shadow, and it's the being is like on the shadow on the trees behind it is like 10 times the size of the being, which means the light is coming from down below and reflecting the shadow up on top of the trees.
Right.
So they pick this up. Then that night, the event is over, and this usually happens the last night of the event when it's over. So Sunday morning, everybody's going home. So it's 2:00 in the morning. It's a birthday party. It's 2:00 in the morning, and this is the most bizarre story I've ever heard. They're sitting there, and there's 44 people. So there's 9 people who were in this birthday party, and they're on this sand flat. So it's like an open area. But the thing, if you've ever been to Mount Shasta, you cannot see your hand in front of your face. It is that dark. So they're sitting there, and they're having this birthday party, and it's 2:00 in the morning. And then all of a sudden, the one woman who's an intuitive, who actually can vibrate and get up and pick up the message, she goes, hey, they're here. And then the people go, how do you know? I just know. They're here. And it's the idea Chris Bledsoe will talk about. Once you've touched the craft, you can vibrate with the craft. So when the craft's in the air, you can feel the vibration. Hey, they're here. You can feel the vibration. So she said, they're here. And they said, well, how do you know? How do you know? So I just know they're here. And then she goes, oh, look, there's a light. And they should see the light. It's the same story. There's a light along the edge of the forest. And then everybody says, same thing they always say. Oh, it's just some camper. They just got their light on in the middle of the night or whatever. It's just a campsite. And she says, no, that's them. I'm sure that's them. Hey, they say they want us to come over there. And then the other people go, we can't go over there. It's dark as can be. I mean, somebody's going to break a leg. It's like totally dark. And then so I guess she relays the message to them. And she says, oh, they said, that's okay. They're going to come here. And then it's like elephants. It was like these elephants. Boom, 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 boom. And they could hear these elephants. And remember, I got 3 of the 9 witnesses on camera. They told this story. So I've got 3 of them. And we sort of know who the others are. And so it sounds like these elephants coming. And then the bizarre thing happens. These 9 people are sitting there. And all of a sudden, these 9 people are levitated into the air. and they're up in the air and they're just freaking out. They have no idea what's going on. And so they all grab hands and they start to ohm. They don't accident, they're ohm, and they're ohming. All of a sudden these beings appear, and then the beings start to ohm, and they're ohming, and the beings are ohming. And I remember the most dramatic part was, first of all, they said, and it sounded like we were underwater. Our voices when we were ohming, it was really weird, like we're underwater. And I go, hey, they're in a Zendra. I've heard so many stories about Zendras that when you talk inside a Zendra, it sounds like you're underwater. So they're inside this portal. This thing is opened up. They've opened up this portal. These 9 people are levitated up in the air. They're all holding hands, and these beings are there. And then they really didn't want to talk. But by the end of the interview, they're all fighting to talk. And I remember the one guy from San Francisco. Yeah, I know he's just an ordinary guy, just ordinary job, whatever. And I remember he was asked by my assistant, said, so, and Adamo was there? Yeah, he was there. And these other beings were there. And then she says, how many beings were there? And the guy says, there were as many beings as there was trees in the forest. And there's like millions of trees at Mount Shasta. It's like unbelievable. And it's like, there was that many beings? He said, yeah, there. So I have no idea how many, all these, and they were all etheric beings all around. So yeah, all these hundreds of thousands of beings around these 9 people levitated up into the air. And then I said to the guy, I said, so how long did it last? And you get the same story. It's like when you get people who are abducted, they go, I don't know, time and space disappeared. We have no idea how long it lasted. And then it ended, and then they went back to their tents, and then they said they were still walking around the tents. These beings were walking around the tents, and the people are so freaked out. Some of them actually packed up the tent at like whatever it was, 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever, and went home. They wouldn't even wait till the sun came up. They were out of there, man. They were just freaking out. And then some of the people went, and my friends that told me the story that put me onto it are staying at this cabin down at the bottom of the mountain. And these people come there, and the being actually appears in this cabin. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you can't make this stuff up, especially when you got it on camera. So what happened was I'd always chased these stories, and I always got an indication. I don't know if you've seen the tape I have of Ron Pandolfi. You know where Ron Pandolfi is?
Not me personally, no.
Very, very high level intelligence guy. He's been involved since 1991. And he always says everybody in the UFO field is a loon, crook, or worse. And he talks about all what they're doing now. It's a techno scam. They're trying to get money from the government. It's a techno scam, and they're trying to run this thing and put off, trying to rip everybody off for money and stuff. And he plays this real sort of the evil disinformation guy, but he's been doing the same line every time. And at one point, he's on a cruise, and I always heard the story. The story is his wife came in a portal, that she was dropped off like Moses, and she was picked up by somebody, brought her to the Reagan White House, and they meet. And it's just this bizarre, weird story that she's like an alien. She comes through the portal, and I know her, and she's got a master's degree, and he's got a PhD, and it's like, so, and anyway, they're on this cruise, and they play this little game, like she's the princess, and he's the footman. He's your guard. He's her footman. So they're on this cruise going through the Panama Canal, and they're filming, and they're sitting in this thing, and it's very hard to hear, whatever. So Ron's sitting there, his daughter, she's about 6 years old, sitting on his lap, and then she goes to him. She goes, so, footman, what do you say? And then he says, and I got it on camera. He says, people have always wondered what it's like to go into the next world. He said, how did he put it? An opening is about to take place. Next time John, he pans over, and this John guy, he's cleaning his glasses. This guy's name is John Sillison. He's in LA. And John Sillison says, next time John goes to the desert, a number of us here are going to go into the next world and come back again. And he put it on his wife's YouTube channel. And of course, I grabbed it off there. And then I cut that little clip, and I put it out, and he was just furious. Because people are going to him and saying, you see, Cameron's got this thing about you talking about a portal. And he was just furious. And that's what I say, when you come down to this thing of the portal, you start to realize, hey, maybe Ron Pandolfi said this. There's got to be something to this. He wasn't cute. He didn't know I was going to pick it up. He was just talking, to these people, friends. I knew who all the people were. And so you have this whole idea that the portal thing may be real. And so I actually went after this event at Mount Shasta in 2000. I went to one of Ron Pandolfi's guys, sort of helped him out or whatever. And he had been through a portal. He talked about a portal in California that he was going to take us through or whatever. He described the portal, what it looked like and stuff like that. And they were always playing this game. I was trying to get them to describe the portal. Is this real? Does she come through the portal? How does it work? The daughter described being on the other side and stuff like that. And so I went to this, Kevin Albert is the guy's name. I went to Kevin. I said, hey, Kevin, there's been another portal at Mount Shasta. They opened another one. And I said, 9 people have described the story. I said, isn't it time you told me what the CIA knows about portals? He said, okay, make a deal. You get these people on camera. We go to Hollywood. We do a show. You get it on camera, and then I'll tell you what the CIA knows. I go, great. But unfortunately, the translator on the interview worked for the Pandolfis, and she went to them and she said, Grant's got to bring the CIA in. Don't get involved. They're bringing in the CIA. They just, nobody would talk after that. So there's a story that we've got on camera, the 3 of them. The story hasn't gotten anywhere because they don't really want to be publicized. They don't want to publicize this sort of thing. You get these kind of stories and you realize this thing is a little more complex than
Yeah.
extraterrestrials, and that you have these portals. Or I'll tell you one last story and then you can ask another question. I actually got to if you followed American Cosmic, they talk about this Tyler D guy. His name is Tim Taylor. I actually met him at a cottage in Pennsylvania, and I'd had download experiences. He had the download experience when he got this invention that they sold the company. I don't know how much the invention was part of the company, but the company apparently was sold for $100 million on NASDAQ. So he gets these inventions, and he talks about the way he deals with the beings. And again, he talks about them as intelligence. He doesn't so much talk about extraterrestrials. And he says, you know, he sleeps for 8 hours, then he gets up, then he goes back to sleep for an hour. That's important. And then he gets up and he gets a glass of water and he goes and sits on the porch in Florida. And he sits there with this big glass of water and he drinks in the sun, and they start to talk to him. And he's got 40 patents, and they're all medical patents, and they're coming from these beings. So I'm talking about downloads. And I'm telling them my download experiences in 2012 and stuff like that. He introduces me to an experiencer that I still know very well. And what he's doing is he's watching the experiences. That's the key. You got to watch the people that are talking to the intelligence. Forget about the lights in the sky. You got to talk to the people. And he was big on Chris Bledsoe. He was the guy that sort of discovered Chris Bledsoe and brought in the intelligence people and stuff like that. And Chris asked him, what are you doing on my property? My kids are all upset, you know, like you're ruining my life and stuff like this. What the heck are you doing? And he said, well, Chris, he said, it appears they like you, Chris. You've got to contact with them. They don't seem to like us. They don't talk to us. So we're here to find out what they're telling you.
Yep.
And so when I'm talking to him about this, he suddenly pulls out his cell phone. Or first, I'll tell you, he tells me the story of the invention that he got. And this is in the book. They talk about going to the Pentagon, and the 1-star general says, who came up with this invention? And they go, Tim did. And they all point at him, and he thought he was going to get an award or whatever. And he said, he told me that, he said, you know, Grant, the morning that idea came into my head, the last thing I remember the night before was a hooded figure standing at the end of the bed. I said, really? Could you see its face? And he goes, no, couldn't see its face. And Jim Semivan talked about the same thing. The hooded figure you couldn't see the face. You can never see the face.
Yep.
And so
I've had that,
I said,
actually.
yeah, that's the thing. So you see these things that they're portraying. But anyway, so he shows me this photograph, and I don't know if you heard this story. He's got his cell phone. He pulls his cell phone out. And I didn't know who this guy was. I didn't realize he was going to be super famous guy. And I would have listened. I would ask him some questions. I'm just like, whatever, you know. He shows me this thing, and he's got these 2 guys, and they're flying through space, and it's a painting. And he says, "What do you think of this?" I go, "Yeah, I don't know." And he goes, "What about this?" And he shows me this painting of these balls all going down this tunnel, like going from big down to getting smaller as go down the tunnel. And I go, "I don't know, Tim. I have no idea." And then he shows me this painting of an eclipse in 3 different paintings as the eclipse takes place. And then he shows me the side of this building, and there's these outer space things. And then he shows me this car on top of the parkade, and there's a postcard in the back that talks about time travel and stuff like that. And I go, really? And then he says, "You know where this is?" I go, "No, I don't know where it is, Chris. I don't know, Tim." I said, "I have no idea." He said, "It's a Hughes aircraft building outside of LAX." And I go, "I still don't know what you're talking. No idea what you're talking about." He said, "You know what was there?" I don't know if he said what was there or what was rumored to be there. You know where that was about? And I said, "No." He said, "That's where the jump room was." I said, "Really? Can I see the photographs again?" He shows me the photographs. "Really?" And he said, "You know the one with 2 guys flying through space? You know where that is?" I said, "No, where is it?" He said, "It's right outside the elevator." I said, "Oh man, next time I'm going to LAX, I'm going to check this out." And he says, "Well, there's a guard. Make sure the guard doesn't see you." And I went there. Sure enough, these paintings are there. And that's the thing, is when you run into this thing with the portal thing, and then you have this thing where this guy, this high level guy who has all the clearances, he's got NRO and CIA and NASA, and he's every clearance you can get, this high level guy When he tells a story like that, and he's not really trying to sell me on anything, and it was like a couple of years later, and then I'm saying to myself, why would he show me these photographs? What was Tim Taylor doing at Hughes Aircraft Building? There must be some truth to the story. And that's where I go, and I fascinated. So I wrote a book in Mount Shasta on the portals. And now we've got the new portal story, this one from 2020, which to me is the most bizarre thing. If you could get these 9 people on camera and tell the story, I mean, just absolutely spectacular. It just shows you that we're dealing with something. And the mission Rama, it's all positive. There's no negative stuff. They're all, working with Jesus. I don't know if they have that, but it's very, very spiritual thing. So that's the thing, is whatever you have. And even Mac had said this idea that you manifest what you see. So if you're gray, you're manifesting fear, and you're going to see that, and the beings will change as you go along. You start seeing different beings and stuff like that. And it's like, are they trading these beings off, moving them from one person to another, or one being to another, or are we seeing different beings because we're growing, we're starting to understand, and as we go along, we see different beings?
That's what it's like in near-death experiences.
Interesting. And earlier you mentioned Jacques Vallée, and one of my favorite books of him that he's done was a Passport to Magnolia.
Yeah.
And Jacques Vallée has been known to create the first schism in all of ufology, challenging the notion that the phenomena comes from extraterrestrial planets or other star systems, that there is an interdimensionality aspect to it. And he's also studied various folklore and myths from different cultures, and how you'd have these fairies, these gnomes, these mythological creatures that would appear to the local populace at the time in accordance to where they're at technologically. Now, with respect to that, you just mentioned that the most consistent thing or finding that you've seen in many of the cases and all the research that you've done are two things: portals and gravity. And when you mention that, and I think of all of these other cases, not just from this past century, but other cases as well, that the phenomena does appear to somehow traverse into our dimension from perhaps another type of interdimensionality aspect, and that there's also this levitation phenomena that's associated with it as well. Interestingly enough, you've also mentioned Jim Simivan, the ex-CIA officer who also partnered with ATIP, Tom DeLonge's company. Chris Mellon was in it, Lou Elizondo, and other heavy hitters. And ATIP, or To the Stars Academy, they were filled with advisors from ATIP, such as Elizondo. They suggest, in terms of the phenomena, that there is an aspect where it has an ability to not only influence consciousness, but it can also alter or change the way that we perceive things. Mm-hmm. And there was a slide that Chris Mellon had released a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2017, an official ATIP slide where it said that government officials could perhaps be compromised by some of these psychotronic means that these NHI have an ability to manipulate and alter consciousness. When you talk about these various cases, for instance, with Mount Shasta, it's been known that the phenomena has almost a manipulative and trickster element to it, that it manifests itself differently to different groups of people for whatever purpose we don't know. But do you believe that in terms of the paranormal aspect, with spirits, devils, sprites, jinn, say from the Muslim religion, and other types of paranormal activities, do you believe that the paranormal aspect is from the same source that NHI or UFOs or aliens come from as well? Are we dealing with a singular type of entity or intelligence, or multiple ones? What is your leading theory on that?
Okay, where I would change is, again, the number one message is oneness versus separation. So as I go along, I less and less believe that there is someone out there that is influencing us. That's what we want. There's us here, and there's them, and they're either good guys or they're bad guys, and all this sort of stuff. to me, everything is consciousness. There is no physical world. If you
Right.
break down the physical world, it comes down to, at best, energy fields. An electron is a field. It's not an actual object. You need an observer in
Agreed.
order to make sense. Nothing, it versus bit. The idea that a phenomenon is not a real phenomenon until it's an observed phenomenon. So we are the ones creating it. Now, the way the materialist world is built is, oh, there was this singularity. And it's like, well, where'd it come from? Well, we don't have to answer that question. It's like there's a singularity and everything came out of nothing. And it just all sort of appeared out of nothing. And then you get like a cell. And I bring this up with the amoeba. So an amoeba has, it's the simplest single cell form of life. It has 12 quadrillion cells, and it has up to 670 billion base pairs. And people want me to believe that these 12 quadrillion cells all just sort of appear out of nowhere and all just go in the right three-dimensional spot at the right three-dimensional and get 670 billion base pairs all right without any mistakes. And this is happening by accident. It's like, no. So there's a singularity. And I would say that the idea is there time and space? If you start talking to experiencers, they say there's no time and space. It doesn't. So is there actually time and space? Is there any out there? That's what John Wheeler said. There is no out there. It's happening in our head. Deepak Chopra says, the closest I think, everything is an activity inside consciousness. So you have the out-of-body experience. You have the out-of-body experience, Christian, you float up and you look back at your body and you say, is consciousness in the brain? And you go, no, it ain't, because the brain's over there. The consciousness is here. The brain,
Exactly.
the body is in the consciousness. And then you can float over to the window and look out and see the universe, and you realize the universe is also inside your consciousness. This is where we're missing. So the singularity to me would be a singularity of consciousness. God did not create the heaven and the earth. God created the sparks of the divine, and we're the ones creating the heavens and the earth. You do not have a phenomena until it's an observed phenomena. It's the whole idea that we observe it, we're building it, and it's all made out of consciousness.
Like the double slit experiment?
Yeah, this is the idea that you see quantum physics is going in the same direction, where the physical world is starting to disappear. And you're starting to realize like it's way more complex, and it comes down to, so if there is no time and space, how big is the universe? A singularity in that's how they can move from one point in the other. That's what they said to the people when they're on board the ship. There was 3 women in a tent. 2 of them were pulled and they were on board the ship. And then the being said to them, imagine it within your head. Where do you want to go? Imagine it within your head. And as soon as you imagine it in your head, push the button. And they pushed the button and boom, they're instantly there. Or my friend Ron Johnson out of Utah. He said, they asked him, where would you like to go? He said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. They said, Ron, it's within you. Go within yourself. Imagine it. And as soon as you, it's going to take about 1 second. And he sat there and he said, in 1 second, there was this heavy, intense G-force. And he looked out the window and there was the Milky Way off in the distance. That's like 100,000 light years in 1 second. There's something wrong with our time and space idea of the universe. And that's why I say it's all consciousness. And that's where we sort of make the mistake. We think that there's them there influencing us. So when you see something, we're the ones they're creating. We're all the same thing, that we are part of what we're seeing. So that's why some people see gray, some people see this. If you go to Russia, they don't see the same type of beings that we do. The Mission Rama people don't see the same. We are creating this whole thing. And so it's all one thing. There's no separation. We're all sparks of the divine. We're all creating this thing, but it's a world almost like the idea now with the simulated universe. People can now actually believe. They say, is it a simulated universe? Yeah, it could be. This whole idea that it's all just an illusion. It's all like a dream, and that our ideas of the physical world, when you break them down, they start not making a whole lot of sense in terms of explaining. But we always want to have this idea because we're so embedded in this us versus them. They're here and they're influencing us. They're making us do this kind of stuff. And no, we are part of this whole thing, especially if Michael Newton is a fact, that we came into the world to do something. And we say, say to you guys, hey, I'm going to come in and you guys are going to have a podcast and you're going to interview me and you're going to do this. Okay. And you're off doing your thing and I'm doing my thing. And everybody has these encounters with each other. That's the way I see the world working, and instead of this idea that and that's where you had the Mellon. You talked about the slide 9, Mellon's slide 9, and that's Ron said, Ron Pandolfi said, this is a techno scam. This is trying to shake down Congress for billions of dollars. Everybody walks out with a suitcase full of monies in 10s and 20s. And basically what you want to do is you want to scare the living daylights out of people. The image I got last night was this idea of the little 3-year-old kid holding on to the hem of his mother and hiding behind her skirt. And this idea that we are victims in the world, and that there's these beings that are doing stuff, and that's what they're doing. They're saying, hey, they do the whole thing. They say they can go through metal surfaces. Well, they got that from Skinwalker Ranch. The reason they went to Skinwalker Ranch is because they wanted to know, how do you put 4 bulls inside a trailer, a locked trailer, without opening the door? How do you, the woman goes and puts the groceries away, and then goes to the next room, comes back, and the groceries are all back in the bag? How do you do that? And I even wrote a book on ports where things are appearing and disappearing. And the DIA, there's actually a document from 1974 where the DIA says, if we could learn apportation, how this works, we could actually go to the enemy, we could go into the vault, get the documents, bring them back to Washington, photocopy the documents, go back, put them back in the vault, and they wouldn't even know we were there. And that's the whole idea. How do you move stuff around? That's why they went to Skinwalker Ranch. And that's what the slide 9 is all about. It's trying to sell Congress on the fact that there's these evil aliens, and man, they could play with your brain, and they can do all this kind of stuff. And in effect, it's just selling it that the beings, if there's beings, it's vibrating at a higher level. And I have a theory of the book I'm eventually going to write is called The Theory of Wow, where I go through this whole thing, and people have to stop and think. I even posted today, and it's got a lot of traction. It said, okay, they've disclosed that UFOs exist. Now, why are they here? Nobody asks these questions. It's like, what is really going on here? And I think that's where we sort of fall off the track, that we want to turn into us versus them, instead of understanding that we are part of the mystery that we are seeing. And there may not be any time, space, gravity. There may not be any of this kind of stuff, that we have created it out of consciousness. And so the theory of wow says they're doing these weird things. So they mutilate cattle. I said to Linda Howe at one point, I said, Linda, you know why they took every last drop of blood out of the cow? No, why? Because you wouldn't investigate it if they didn't. They wanted it to be really weird. They want you to go, oh man, where's my camera? It's like, holy cow. Same as I had the experience with Chris Bledsoe, where they were letting the dogs out of the house. Where I was Chris Bledsoe, letting the dogs out of the house, and I'm not impressed. It happens 3 times. Once when I'm there, twice after I leave. And these dogs are getting let out, and the door's wide open, and the dogs are coming back in the house. And I'm thinking, whatever, just like, Chris, you left the door open. It didn't impress me. So when I go back to his house after this 2013 citizens hearing thing, I'm taking the rent-a-car back to Washington. I stop at his place again, and it happens within 10 minutes when I'm there, where it's almost like the intelligence said, you weren't impressed with us letting the dogs into the house? Watch this. And if you heard the story where, and it's going to be in the movie, the movie's coming out, this will be in the movie, where we're standing at the back porch, and then Chris says that Nellie, the black lab, is right behind us. And Chris says to me, he says, you want to go inside? I say, yeah, let's go inside. And we go inside, and the dog comes on my left side. So Chris is here, I'm there, and the dog comes on my left side. And then I hear Chris go, Nellie, what happened to you? And I look at the dog, there's blood shooting at the dog's neck all over the wall.
Oh, I read about that.
And I'm going, and I had left the camera. Is this coincidence? I happened to have the camera on the front seat of the car. I don't know what I was doing, but I had the camera out of the suitcase, and it was on the front seat. And I go, this is weird. The dog's being let out. That wasn't weird, but it's like, holy cow. And I go and I start filming this, and that's when he learned to heal. When he has the blood, and you see the rag, it's all full of blood, and the dog's just lying there very calmly, whatever. And then after it was over, I look at my pants, and there's no blood everywhere, but down my pants, all down the side of my pants, there's blood all over the place. And it was sort of like, are you impressed with this? I was pretty impressed. And then Chris said, he said to me, we were having a discussion after, and he said, oh, I think that was the shadow people. And I said, shadow people? Why would the shadow people cut your dog? And he said, well, they were evil. And I said, well, how do you know they're evil? And he said, well, they're dark. And I said, just because they're dark doesn't mean they're evil. And I said, you know what I think's going on, Chris? He said, what? I think they want this in the movie, because Warner Brothers want to do the movie. Mel Gibson want to do the movie. They're going to have Julia Roberts in the movie, and they're going to do the Chris Bledsoe story. And I said, they wanted the movie. They want this bizarre thing in the movie, because they want everybody to go, holy cow, what's going on here? And they drag you down the rabbit hole, and you can't get out. And he said, no, I don't think so.
Mr. Cameron, you mean to tell me that there is and intentionality with the phenomena to do these high strangeness,
Absolutely.
out of the ordinary things for regular people to snap out of the confines of
Yeah.
what they believe reality is, to notice them.
Yeah. It's basically the idea that when you get paranormal phenomena, the first thing you stop and say is, if this paranormal phenomena is happening, there's something wrong with the way we see the world. If we got it all figured out, we always have what's called presentism. We believe our grandparents were total idiots that believed all sorts of stupid things. Our parents, they listened to bad music and they're stupid, and we got it all figured out. And we always do this sort of thing. And so what's happening here is that they are basically showing you're saying, oh, the world's physical. And then somebody goes through a wall. You hear the abductors going through a wall, and you go, well, if they're actually going to the wall, then what's going on? And what they do, science does not advance except if you have one thing. You need curiosity. If there's no curiosity, there's no science. Science is trying to figure out. And if you go back to Max Planck, who invented quantum physics, he said, Professor Joly in 1874 told him, hey, don't go into physics. We got it all figured out, 1874. And that's what we were doing, is that this thing is saying, no, it doesn't work that way. And you start looking at all these weird things. And that's when we make our discoveries. They're just dragging us down the road, and they're trying to say, no, the world doesn't work the way you think it is. That's why I call it the theory of wow. They just want, that's why I said that the dog man story with the cigarette. Why would they do something so bizarre? Because they want you to go, did you hear that story about this dog man smoking a cigarette? That is just the wildest story. And that they do these really weird things because they want to shatter your naive reality. You think you got it all figured out, and they're going, no, you ain't got it figured out. Watch this. And they just do these weird things that make you realize the world is a lot more complex and a lot more strange than what you think it is.
Yes, and I just wanted to say that that's something that comes up in near-death experiences a lot. Like they'll talk about, like you were saying, this oneness. They're shown that their reality is broken. A lot of people who have religious beliefs and dogmas will end up coming out of the experience and dropping the religion because they're like, no, I know the truth, and they're shown this oneness, and this you versus me is just it's not real. That this is an illusion. That there's we're all one, and when you hurt someone else, you're really hurting yourself. And one channeler had that I follow, that he claims to channel an ET being. Somebody asked him, well, when did existence start? And he says existence has always been. He says within existence there are starts and stops, but not to existence itself. And he said you can imagine, because it goes to what you were saying, that everything is that one particle, and the particle is here, then it's there, and then it's there, and then you start to notice it's everywhere all at once. And that's something that they also mentioned, that everything is happening now, not so when people see a past life or a future life, it's all still going on concurrently. It's just happening in the same now moment, and what we perceive time is just a different perspective of the same now moment.
Yeah, and you get the crossover thing. That's what you get, is you start getting these crossovers where you realize everybody's tapping into the same thing. And some people are using channeling, and I've done a lot of work on channeling. And my experiences of the way I gotten in the field, I wrote a book called Contact Modality, 70 different ways to get in the field. And you start seeing these patterns, like you mentioned the fact that people don't understand the divorce rate among near-death experiencers is 75 to 80%.
Yep.
Because and same with UFOs. A lot of UFO people, you can't keep a relationship going because you can't talk to anybody about this stuff. And that's the deal where you start seeing these crossovers, like near-death experiences. If you look at the free survey stuff that everybody ignores, 37% of all near-death people who have had abduction experiences or experiences with beings say they've had a near-death experience. 37%.
Yep.
What do you think? Is this random that you had a near-death experience and you also got abducted by an alien? Do you think this is random, or do you think it's part of the pattern?
That's what I was
coming in.
I was just telling you that, George, before we got on this podcast, because he asked me about someone who was on my podcast, and I had gotten Jeff Tolley to join, and he had a near-death experience where he tried to kill himself. He took pills, injected himself as well. He's like, there was no trying. He's like, I was going to die. And he talks about the out-of-body experience. And I had asked him, because he also had a UFO experience, and he mentioned the UFO experience happened after his near-death experience. It seems that people who come in touch with this higher level of consciousness and vibration and frequency, it's like a switch gets turned on and they're more susceptible to it, and they're able to get contact a lot more easily. And maybe it was always there, they just didn't realize it. But that seems to be occurring, which I find fascinating.
Almost what happens in near-death experience. Part of the book I wrote, the contact modalities, I'll talk about trauma. The trauma is a big event. So we say it's terrible. I was abused as a child or whatever. And you take a look at it, it's all the mediums and stuff. You always have this a trauma event, or you see it as a bad event. But what it does, it's forcing you to dissociate. It's ripping the veil. And once you rip the veil, then you can go through.
Exactly.
And you start getting all these crossovers. Another one I always like to mention when you take the crossovers is 40% of, and I've had this experience 3 times in a row now, is 40% of all people who've had near-death experiences, or no, 40% of all experiencers say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. 31% of near-death experiencers say at one point during their experience they knew the answer to everything in the universe. I've had the experience 3 times, knowing the answer to everything, and it fades as your left brain comes back online, like coming out of a dream. Your left brain comes back online, and you forget it, and you start seeing all these crossovers, and it's all the same thing. We can learn from all these different things. Ron Johnson, who's this experiencer out of Salt Lake City area, he's a Mormon guy. He has most of his were out-of-body experiences, and he still thinks he has abduction experiences. I think they probably all are out-of-body experiences, but he tells the story where LB, everybody has a different being, and they always have a different name, and his name is LB, and LB takes him to the spirit world 3 times. The first time he's in sort of lower level, it's all sort of dark, he can't see anything. Second time he's with his mother, his dead mother, and he can hear her and talk to her, but he can't see her. The third one, LB takes him into the spirit world, and he's with his mother, and he's in a garden type meadow area. It's beautiful, and he says, I look over, and she says, Ron, when you die, you're going to get a room in this building. And he says, it looks like a temple in some small town. He's a Mormon guy. So here's this, reflection. So he's seeing this small temple, Mormon type temple. And his mother says, when you die, you're going to get a room in this building. And your father, and he can see the thing opens up, and he can see his father's room, and his father's in this room, whatever. And he says, we go into the building. He says, and the weirdest thing was, it was like 10 or 100 times the size inside is outside. And I said, hey, that's exactly what the UFO people say as well. This craft is bigger on the inside as outside. So is he in a flying saucer, or is he in a Mormon temple in the spirit world? And he goes in there, and his mother's showing him around, and I won't get into details, but at one point he says, she takes him down to the far end of this building, and there's this table with these crystals in the table coming out. And if you've done Michael Newton, the crystal thing. You open the book, and there's a crystal, and you look at it at a certain angle, and you can see your past lives, and you plan your next life or whatever. And he says, I'm there, and I'm going, holy cow, he's got crystals. And the crystals come out of the table. And she says, Ron, you don't have a crystal now, but when you die, your crystal will come out of the table. And then he looks, and he goes, hey, here's my dog's crystal. And he said, in 1972, his dog disappeared. He said, I always wondered what happened to my dog. So he looks at the dog crystal, and he's looking at the crystal, and he sees that the neighbor shot the dog, threw it in the back of the truck, took it to the dump yard, and threw it into the dump. And he said, holy cow. And I'm thinking, like, you got him talking about the crystals. And then if you take a look at, there's a UFO, I've always said the government, there's elements in the government that are disclosing. And one of the things that happened at the last days of the Reagan administration, there was a UFO documentary called UFO Cover-Up Live. And everybody said, oh, this was total garbage. And this is where they introduced the falcon and the condor, the birds, and all this kind of stuff. And they're in backlit and whatever. And the falcon, who was Richard Doty, says, the weirdest thing I ever saw, and he has the alien, and the alien's got a crystal in his hand. The weirdest thing I ever saw, they had a crystal, and they could look back, and they could show the crucifixion of Jesus Christ in this crystal. And you look at a certain angle, I go, hey, that's what Ron Johnson's talking about. That's what Michael Newton's talking about. And you start to realize it's all the same thing. You have all these different things, and it's how you envision it. So if you're going to be a Mormon guy, you're going to see it in a Mormon thing. If you're Mission Rama, you're going to see it in a Mission Rama thing. But we are part of what we're creating, and we create all this stuff to almost like our higher self is coming down, and with these agreements, and we're sort of leading ourselves to where we're going to go. And that's when you get these synchronicities. Synchronicities are basically just something that you get shown, and you go, oh yeah, now I remember. It's like you think that it's you've seen it before, but they're showing it to you that you saw it before, and that's why it comes with this absolute certainty. If you get the downloads, and I keep saying to people, anybody who's had a download knows it comes with absolute certainty. It's not like this is a good idea. This is the way it works. That was my first one with the consciousness thing, where I saw the thing flying away from me in the second night in 1975, and I go, what's it doing? And this led to this whole idea. Like nobody asked, like, what the hell? People see a UFO and I say, hey, so what was it doing? They go, it wasn't doing anything. I said, how long was it there? Just a couple seconds. Do you think it saw you? Do you think it wanted to see you? Yeah, I think so. And it's like, and you start realizing like they just appear and they show themselves, and that's the whole thing, that we are part of this whole thing.
Wow, amazing, amazing. My next question for you, Mr. Cameron. Thank you. Wow, my mind is blown. I've never considered looking at it from this perspective, and it certainly challenges the preconceived notions of what I thought I knew about this field first coming into it. I
That may
wanted
be
to
why they're
ask
not
you,
disclosing, because these are the kind of elements that they may be facing.
Right.
Are you really going to tell people that the world is not the way you think it is? And I mean, just like they may have some answers that are just going to rock the world, that it's not as simple as people think it is. People still assume that it's ETs. And I keep saying, if you take a look at the ETs and you start looking, they don't breathe, they don't sleep, there's no bathrooms on things, and you start, what are we actually dealing with? If it doesn't have sex organs, or I'd say to people, hey, you saw an alien? Yeah. Have any clothes on? I go, no, come to think of it, no, it didn't have any clothes on. I said, you don't think that's kind of weird? And they go, yeah, no, think about it. It's kind of weird. Didn't have any clothes on. And it's like, do you have any sex organs? No, I never thought about that either. No, I don't look at any sex organs. And you say, well, what are we really dealing with here? And that's the more you look at it, the more you go down this. But I was sort of led there. I mean, I always say that if I hadn't had the sighting in 1975, if I hadn't had the download experience, I had to be just as stupid as everybody else. It was only because I had these experiences, which I probably gave to myself. I had this agreement where I would remember these things, and that's where how my life has turned out. I've been led every step of the way. I mean, I had this
Yeah.
woman come up to me in 2013 after I got the consciousness download, and they said, "Are you still going to talk to Pam Dupuis?" And I go, "Yeah, I guess so." It's like, oh, you know, and then she comes to the house, and I go, she starts telling me, and she says, "Oh, I was flying the ship." And I go, "What? You're flying the ship?" It's a 75-year-old lady. I go, "Come on!" It's like I've never heard it in my life. And that's the whole thing. Like, is that a random event where suddenly all these 36 people start coming to me? And he went to, after I went to Whitley Strieber, said, "Hey, Whitley." And then he tells that he was talking about flying the craft. And I would have things like another crossover. People on board the ship, Jim Semivan, they first got the indication from Jim Semivan. Jim Semivan, they asked him, "Hey, when you had these beings in the room, was there any telepathy?" And he said, "Hey, that was the weirdest part." He said, "I was standing there and there was this entity behind me." He said, "It may have been a gray or a mantid or whatever. And it had this guardian type thing going on about it." I go, "Guardian type thing?" And I'm thinking Michael Newton. If you, after you die, you go in front of this council and your spirit guide stands behind you on the left side. And I started realizing, holy shit, there's all these people that I talked to on board the ship. The guy with the U.S. Air Force retired colonel said, "I'm on board the ship and there's somebody behind me and they're talking to me." And they're saying, "Okay, go ahead and do it." He says, "I don't know what to do." They said, "You know what to do, just do it." And he looks at the paddle and he goes to put his hand there. He starts flying the craft. And so he talked about these beings behind him. And then so I asked Whitley Strieber, I said, "Hey, Whitley, did you ever have beings behind you that you couldn't really see, you were not allowed to look at, that were behind you?" He said, "All the time." He said, "When I was at the panel board, when he was flying, he was going to fly the craft, he's sitting at the panel board with these symbols on it. And he said, he thought to himself, I think I'll steal this thing. I'm going to try to steal this thing." And he said he could hear telepathically someone behind him laughing. And then this is the whole deal. You start getting these patterns and you go like, this is not coincidence. You get these things, but it all goes back to consciousness. It goes back to this idea that we're missing this key component of, in quantum
Yes.
physics, guys picked it up. Consciousness is primary. You can't get behind consciousness. And we keep wanting to say, oh, there's a physical world and that creates consciousness and these beings are separate from us. It's all one thing. It may all be like John Wheeler talked about the idea there was only one electron. I know why their weight is the same, because it's all one electron. There's only one electron in the universe, and it's moving back and forth through time and space. And you get these kind of things where you start reconsidering the world, that the world is going to be way stranger. Or the delayed choice experiment that Wheeler did, where he changed the past, where he had an event in the past, he changed the past event, and that kind of stuff. Where quantum physics is going the same way. It's this weird world that's being exposed to us through these bizarre things that they're doing, that make you stop. And as you know, once you get in this, once you have an experience, you know exactly what happened, exactly what day of the week it was, you know anything, and you are
Yep.
down the rabbit hole, and you're getting divorced, and there's nobody going to talk you out of it. And
Yep.
that it has this obsession about it, and that's what they're doing. They're just slowly moving us along this path of disclosure. And that's why they said to me, we know how to land the plane. I knew exactly what they were talking about. Is like, they're running the show. They've done this on 1,000 different planets before, and they're just slowly dropping these little hints and acclimatizing people. And it's like a breadcrumb chase, that we're chasing these breadcrumbs, and they're slowly moving us. Because the way we do it is we go into another country, we say, we're here to bring you freedom and democracy, Jesus and McDonald's. And then they point guns and say, get the hell out of our country. Who do you think you are? And they're not doing it. There's this idea of you're not allowed to interfere, and they're getting us to figure it out. They're getting you curious,
Yep.
and we're figuring it out. They can't do your homework for you. And that's what the alien that the Canadians supposedly were dealing with said. We cannot interfere. The only time we would ever interfere in the human race, and this relates to the nuclear missile stories you've heard. The Canadian alien apparently said to the Canadians, the only time we'll ever step in is if there's a nuclear exchange, and we can stop a nuclear exchange.
Yep.
And we can prove that we can do it. We can take the moon in front of the entire world, split it in half, and put it back together to prove that we can stop a nuclear exchange. Other than that, we are going to allow the human race to stew in its own juices. They're going to allow us, and that's why I say, whatever happens, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, you're going to learn. It's experience. You in fact, if you came into the world, you plan to die at some point.
Yep.
You plan to go through a windshield of a car and die or whatever. You've planned these events. These are not random events. You plan to. It's the same with the 37% of near-death experiencers.
Yep.
Who are abductees. It's you plan the one and you plan the other to learn different lessons. So you have to start looking at the world as consciousness, and the fact that everything that we have is not good or bad. It's an experience. And are you learning from it, or are you not learning from it? And the whole idea that you come in, if it's true that you come into the world and there's a reincarnation thing, you come into the world so probably to learn something. You didn't come in here for random just to see what happens. You came in to say, I'm going to work on greed, envy, fear, whatever.
Yep.
And at the end of your life, when you leave, according to Michael Newton, the 7,000 people who regressed, they all say the same thing. When they say how to work out, Christian. And then it's, you planned the thing, and you can't bring up Hillary Clinton, you can't bring up the dog ate my homework or my mother-in-law or whatever, you because they're going to go, time out. This is not about anybody else. This is about you. You planned this. How did it work out? And everybody says the same thing. I could have done better. I forgot to do this. I forgot I was going to do that, and stuff. And that's the thing. We're in this thing of lessons. It's unlimited amount of time. The universe is a loop. We're feeding it in. We are the creators. We're looping it in. It's getting more complex, more complex. We're looping in experiences, and it just gets more and more complex. And it's like a movie. So if you have a movie, you can have these sort of like what looks like good and bad events. It's like a movie. God goes into the movie theater, and it's like, I love you, Christian. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, and I love you. And then God's going, oh, this is boring, man. I'm getting out of here. Go to the next movie, and it's like up and down and all this stuff happening. And that's the whole deal. It's this up and down thing that you learn from the bad experiences, and it's a loop that's feeding itself, and the universe is getting more and more complex. It came from an original singularity, not a material singularity, but a consciousness singularity. And it's almost the idea that God is pure consciousness, and he creates the sparks of the divine. And once the vibration starts, the illusion starts. Everything is vibration. And we're vibrating at a very low level material, whatever this, I call it the intelligence. I think because I don't want to break it as to be a separation. It's intelligence. It's part of us. It's this intelligence, higher intelligence, that's feeding information into us indirectly. And that's why I see it. Consciousness primary. Everything is a lesson, and do the best you can, and realize that you come into the world to do something. When you leave, they're going to ask you how did it work out. And the only thing you have to worry about is, what am I here to do? And am I doing it? Nothing else matters. It doesn't matter what you're doing, everybody else is doing. what am I supposed to be doing here? And am I doing it?
Hmm.
That's all we have to worry about.
Everything you've said is you've hit the nail on the head. That's everything that has come out from my research. And that's why it just resonates so much. And I like your analogy with the undersea analogy with it, like us being undersea. And another medium in a book, he drew like an upside down pyramid, just like the lower you get, the denser it gets. And
Yeah.
you have that illusion and that veil. But that is, you
Yeah,
hit
we
the
like
nail
to
on the
do
head.
even the thing with the multidimensionals is like people always say, well, there's multidimensionals. It's like, well, no, once it's a noun, there's the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. And it's this idea, once you name it, it's wrong. There are no nouns. It's all a verb. It's all one thing. It's all alive, and it's a verb. And we want to change it. We make dimensions. So there's these dimensions, and there's different colors, and there's 7 dimensions, there's 9 dimensions, or whatever. And it's like the guy in the water. He drops into the water, and he's down 150 feet, and he says to the fish, "What level am I on?" And the fish says, "You idiot, you're in the water. There's no levels, you're just in the water." And you're at a different vibrating level. It's all consciousness, it's all water, and it's wherever you are. And you can learn to, it sounds like you've been able to do this, Christian. If you learn the techniques, you can actually move out, get
Yeah.
into the field and get it. And that's what inventions. I wrote a book called Inspired, the Paranormal World of Creativity, where I look at inventions, I look at Nobel Prizes, and I look at, relativity and the quantum atom. This stuff came in dreams, it came in
Yep.
downloads and stuff like that. And all the answers are there. And it's
Yep.
the idea to go into the field, get the material, and then bring it back. And we're starting to learn how to do that now.
Yeah. And I just want to say very briefly, and then I'm going to let you ask the next question, George. I have had my own personal mediumship like experiences, and I ended up going to like a medium for asking her a question about something weird that had nothing to do with me. And first thing she said, she was like, "Why aren't you doing this?" And I was like, "Doing what?" She's like, "What I'm doing." She's like, "You know, you can do this, right?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know how. It just happens randomly." And just like you have to practice. And I started practicing, and meditation is what helped get me there. And I started having these downloads, messages, and people who we would call as deceased, but they're to me very much alive, and they're telling me things. Their mouths aren't moving. I just know what they mean, 100% certain, like you were saying. And she told me whatever they say, even if it doesn't make sense to you, it's not for you, it's for the people. So I did ask, I was like, well, if this is real, this is when I first started, if this is real, give me something that I wouldn't know that that person would know. And they started telling me things that didn't make any sense. And I was like, okay, I'll bring it up. And I bring up stuff to my mom. And I was like, were you dealing with a pearl or something? Because I know this sounds weird that I'm bringing this up. And she's like, yes. Like, how did you know? They even told me about a death that was going to happen in the family, things like that. And the validations just kept coming. And it's all very real. I think everyone has the capacity to do this. It's all within us. I still need to practice, but I still get those downloads. And it's just, like you said, I don't know how to explain it. It's just when it happens, it's just like, whoop, and I understand. And I've also gotten the same thing where it wasn't a near death experience, but it was like I was walking. It was kind of like a deja vu that hit me so powerful that I knew everything. I knew why I was here. I knew the answer to any question universe, ETs, whatever. And then 5 minutes later, it like word out. And I was just like, oh no, it was just like, no. And then I just became like me again, left brain. And so, yeah, I completely agree. But just, yeah, I'm done. Sorry, George, go ahead.
Oh, it's quite all right. Experience is belief, and I believe that with Mr. Cameron's work. He does run on his YouTube sessions where he has a call-in aspect for experiencers to kind of share what it is that they've been through. And I'm reminded of how Mr. Cameron shared at the start of this interview that he suggested disclosure isn't necessarily going to come from an official governing body, but from the stories of experiencers, which leads me to this question, Mr. Cameron. In terms of app reports and the study of such, how does this contribute to our understanding of, say, altered states of consciousness, like what our friend Christian went through, and the role of the subconscious mind in shaping our experience of the physical world? And, earlier you mentioned the term synchronicity, which was coined by the OG transpersonal psychologist, Dr. Carl Jung, who believed that there was a deeper hidden component in terms of this underlying universal subconscious that is prevalent throughout all of human experience, irregardless of time period, irregardless of culture or religion. How does this study of apperports contribute to the growing field of, say, parapsychology or neuropsych, for instance, in terms of the Western scientific perspective of understanding the mind?
You're talking abduction reports?
Well, let's go there. Let's try
Okay.
that.
Yeah. So we used to it looked like it was clearly, people being taken. But then I would say before, has anybody ever seen anybody being abducted? And it's like, no, nobody's ever seen anybody being abducted, except for the one Hopkins story about them coming out of the 25th floor or the wind, that sort of thing, which may have been a stage thing that they wanted him to write the story up. But you have the thing with the cameras. So the Jacobs and people would take the cameras. They hide the cameras in the bedroom, and they could never get anything. They went for years. The people turned the camera off, or it would go all sort of snowy when the event took place or whatever. And then now we're starting to realize, the more and more you look at it, people say, hey, it's probably out of body. It's all out of body. And that's why I always look at these weird questions that people don't look at. Is like, why do people wake up and there's two beings standing beside the bed? Like, why did they wake you up? Why did they wake you up? And then they, as soon as you freak out, you go, oh, horrible looking alien, oh my God. And then they put their hand on your head and say, go back to sleep. And the person puts the covers over their head and goes back to sleep. It's like, this isn't making sense. Why are they waking people up? And it's like, they want you to dissociate. They say, okay, he's ready to go. It's like, scared of the living daylights out of the guy. And the person dissociates. It's like this trauma thing. And then you're ready to go. And you when you look at that phenomena, you have the person may be out of their body, and they're on the ship. There's a physical component, but there's a physical component to the whole thing. It's all you can almost like a person who's got the stuff from Jesus, the marks of Jesus and stuff like that. These stigmata things.
Stigmata, yes.
So there's it's all the same thing. But the more we look at the abduction phenomena, the more it looks like it may not be what we think it is. That people are getting different types of beings, and this is a stage thing. There's giving us lessons and stuff like that, and we are part of the experience that we are having. So everything's sort of changed in terms of the beings. And again, if you take a look at abduction now, you got to go back to say, before 1961, I say there was no grays in literature for sure. And I've even got, I show people, I actually went and got all the files of all the abduction, the alien reports between 1947 and 1961. There are no grays, but there are an awful lot of a being with a bubble helmet on, a glass bubble helmet, and one even has the hose going back to a thing on their back. That's straight out of science fiction. I mean, all these people are reporting helmets on beings. When was the last time you heard a being that had a glass helmet on, a bubble helmet? And you start to see this idea that we are part of what we're seeing. And people will say ET, and then I say, okay, if you really believe it's ET, 1896, the year we discovered radioactivity, 1896, you had all these sightings, airship sightings, where they had the big lights, and there was no batteries. These things had to be run by batteries. They're flying around, and they got wooden sails, and they got propellers and stuff like that. And I say, okay, they said they're from Mars. Do you actually seriously now believe those are ETs? That they flew through the vacuum of space on that wooden ship and came from Mars? And everybody goes, no, it's not. Or the 1950, the Canadian being they were dealing with was from Uranus. It's 325 degrees below zero. And I remember the metallurgist told me, he said, Grant, let me assure you, at no time did we ever believe this thing was from Uranus. And this is the whole thing. So why are they saying they're from Uranus? And then suddenly we go into the 1950s, and then suddenly they're from Mars and they're from Venus. People now believe they're from Mars and Venus. Everybody says no, we got past that. And so suddenly it's like, oh, they're from they changed the scenario. They're grays, and they come in and they showed the star map, and they do the star map, and suddenly we get Zeta Reticuli, and then suddenly we get Andromeda and stuff like that, and it all changes from Mars and Venus to Andromeda. And then in 1963 we start getting multidimensional stuff in science fiction, and then suddenly they move from being from Zeta Reticuli to multi-dimension. So they're from the 5th dimension, the 6th dimension, 9th dimension, the 12th dimension. You can see they're just actually moving along as we move along in terms of
Collective
the way
consciousness.
we think.
So based off of that inconsistent track record with respect to the phenomena, saying they're from a specific area, and then there's this seeming evolution of these far out ideas that are commonly associated with it, how would you necessarily put much faith into what they could be communicating to us today?
Well, there'll be a posting on my Twitter tomorrow. I was going to post it today, and then last night it was late, so I didn't post it. But when people ask them, where are you from, you get all sorts of things where people will say, you wouldn't understand. This is what I'm going to post. This woman, she gets this thing, we're from far away, we're from here. You wouldn't understand. And they all string it all together in one thing. Or I've had 4 encounters, not with beings, but with beings that people are dealing with. Like Chris Bledsoe's being sent me the messages in music, and I wrote the book on music and stuff like that. And so I had the 2 women who were dealing with what they call CHON, CHON, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, which are the 4 key elements that make up life on Earth. And these beings, they called themselves Chon, and they're beings, and they don't have any faces, they don't have any ears or anything. They're just sort of like black things, little tiny things with arms. And there's 2 of them. And the one woman was seeing them, and they started channeling. The other woman could pick them up and channel them. These 2 beings. So they said at one point, they said, "Oh, the beings would like to do an interview." I said, "Really? I love doing an interview with the beings." So I go there, and the woman goes into trance, and of course, the question I ask is, "So, are you extraterrestrials?" And the line was classic. They said, "Would you like us to be extraterrestrials? We could do that if you want. We could even take you to our planet. But no, we're not extraterrestrials. We've always been here. You're the visitor." And I'm like, wow. And this is you hear this now. We've always been here. We're here. We've never gone anywhere. And this comes to this idea. Is there any time and space? If it's all one thing, it's all here and now. And that's how when you do remote viewing, or you do out of body experience for sure, people who do a lot of out of body will say, no, you're not going anywhere. You're going within yourself. When you do remote viewing, the person says, okay, here's the target, 673-496. And what does the guy say? Hey, I'm flying there. I'll be there in a second. They go, no, I'm at the target. It's inside yourself. Everything is inside yourself. And what you're doing, you're going inside yourself, and you're reading the system inside yourself. You remote viewing, you're not going anywhere. It's all within you. Same as out of body experience. It's within yourself. You got to go within to go without.
Yep.
And that's where the changing, the phenomena is telling us in different ways. No, it doesn't work that way. No, it makes you think. And I may not have it figured out, but at least I know that there's a possibility that there is no time and space. It's all here and now. It's all one singularity of consciousness, and it appears like it can appear as these vast universes or whatever, and it has this physical nature of vibration in certain things. But in terms of what they're showing us is what I call breaking down naive reality. They just keep doing these weird things that make you, well, maybe this isn't right. Maybe that isn't right. And they're just moving you down the road slowly to the fact that when I started, it was simple. It was ET. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. These are ETs flying in from somewhere else. Like, there's nothing that there was. I suddenly ran into people who were doing light language, and then the channelers and stuff. That was not happening in the 1970s. It is a phenomena that's almost like they're taking the pages of a book and they're turning the pages, and they're going, okay, now look at this, and we go, oh, and the phenomena is changing, but it's moving us down the road to realize it is not your grandmother, it's not your mother's world. It's a completely different world, and they're showing you this thing, the whole idea of the paranormal, because it's weird. it makes you realize it may not be the world you think it is. And that's why they do the weird stuff, because when the weird stuff happens, you can't get it out of your head. You're just trying to figure it out. And that's what I overthink sometimes. I'm thinking, I'm trying to figure it out. And that's why they said, you need to take a break. You need to calm down. We know how to land the plane. And I went, oh, I knew exactly that this is a phenomena and they're leading us through it. And eventually the government's not going to disclose. The phenomena is going to disclose as to what's going on, because I don't think the government really knows. They have bodies, they have crafts. I don't think they may have this idea about portals were run. Pandolfi talks about this portal thing. They understand that it's and that there you go to consciousness. It's not an idea where it's a physical thing. It's a consciousness type thing. I remember there was somebody close to the Pandolfis. I said to him, yeah, I'm getting tired of this, man, because it gets very frustrating. You're working on it all the time and your head is running and stuff like that. And I said, I don't know about this portal thing. There's stuff to it, but I'm getting so tired of this. I mean, I can't get any confirmation from the Pandolfis. I said, hey, do you think I should pack her in? And there's this long pause and he goes, nah, I should probably stick around. So then I said, okay, I take your word for it. You're closer to the situation than I am. And then a couple of years later, we're talking about something not even UFO related. We're into hockey and stuff like that. We're talking hockey, and then he says, you asked that question about the portals, and I said, yeah, it's real. I went, it is. It's like, oh, that's all he said to me. I knew I can't really make a lot of it public, so I didn't basically try to get him to explain, because he's putting them in a bad position or whatever. But that's the whole deal. When you go, it's real. It's like, and if portals are real, then everything's off the table, man. We have no clue what's going on. That they can pop in and pop out. They'll go do the multidimensional thing. We can call it whatever you want. You're just making names. You're just making nouns. You're just making up stuff. It's all one thing, and it's really, really, really complex. That's the thing that I bottom line come to. The more you look at it, the more complex it gets. It just gets weirder and more complex as you go along.
Yeah.
And the experiences are the ones that are telling you. You talk to the experiences that are getting messages from the beings, and forget the government, forget the lights in the sky and stuff like that, and listen to the experiencers. They're the ones that will, and they're willing to tell you that. And that's when you start getting these things where, I remember I asked Yvonne Smith, who's a regressionist out of LA, I said, hey, Yvonne, how many abductees have weird stuff happening to them? And she goes, 99%. And how many had seen ghosts? Like 75%. And you start seeing these stats. How many were talked to about reincarnation? 25%. And you start realizing that there's these patterns. And it's not a straight ET thing. It's this very complex thing, but it's a magnificent universe. That's the whole thing. It's just Einstein, who said it, is not even more magnificent than you think. It's more magnificent than you could ever imagine. That's what we're learning as this thing unfolds to us. This very complex universe that is as I said, it's not your grandfather's world or your grandfather's world. It's a completely different world, and we're on the leading edge. I always tell people that if you realize what's going on and you realize your position, not only have you had a ticket to the Super Bowl, people, it's $10,000, the average ticket for the Super Bowl. That someone say, look, I was at the Super Bowl. Look at my tag for the Super Bowl. I was there. Not only that, most people are outside. They don't even know there's a game going on. We are inside the game and we are on the field. You may be the water boy, the quarterback, whatever, but you are actually playing the game. This is the biggest story of all times. And you and I are playing it. You got to realize you're playing in the Super Bowl. And this is a big responsibility, and you should be honored, because I say to people, you could have been an untouchable in the streets of Calcutta and spend your days in a junkyard looking for something valuable enough to sell for food for tomorrow. You didn't get that. You got to play in the Super Bowl. Forget it. Just appreciate the fact where you are and share what the knowledge you have. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to put as much as I can of what I've learned on the thing. On the internet, I'm putting all my files up there. My books, I don't really try to sell them. I just put them out there so that it records my thing, because I realize this is an important story, and I must have some sort of role that I agreed to do something, and I do the best I can to get the information out to people.
Agreed.
You've certainly opened my perspective, Mr. Cameron. My goodness. Wow. What a new way to look at things.
That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to shock us. That's why I call it the theory of wow. And I even made a joke one time. I said, if you were in another civilization and you want to get a message across to the earth, you go to the classes, and they'd say to the grade ones, hey, well, how do I get a message across? They said, I know what to do. You get some crafts and put lights on them and fly them around. Why do UFOs have lights on them? So you can see them. They want you to see them. If they want to turn off the light, they don't need lights. We don't have lights. The grade 1 class has lights. The second grade 2 class says, hey, let's go. They're doing nuclear stuff. So downrange and downstream from all the nuclear power activities, let's mutilate cattle. Okay. And then the third one comes out, let's do crop circles. Let's make some crop circles. And it's like a class project, all these different class projects. And they're doing all these weird things. And we're all just sitting there, holy cow. And we're taking pictures and we're doing all this kind of stuff. And we're talking about it. And that's what happens is consciousness, the way consciousness rises is everybody starts to talk about it. And the more people talk about it, it's like gay marriage. I said to people, when was gay marriage suddenly get accepted? And everybody goes, I'm not sure. I don't know, 20 years ago. It just suddenly it will flip and it will flip. And everybody, like now, everybody now knows UFOs exist. You may not know what it is, but the consciousness has flipped. And if you talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, eventually 95% of people are going to make the right decision. It's just to get the thing and to raise consciousness. The only way you can raise consciousness is to talk about it. As long as we're not talking about it, everybody's isolated, but we work together and we put the stuff out, and eventually the consciousness will rise. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to change the zeitgeist. They're trying to raise the consciousness to realize it is not, you're not by yourself. This is a very complex world. It's not a physical world the way you think it is. And they're just giving us these sort of hints at what's going on. And you and I are at the leading edge of this thing. And I think we have a major role to put it out. And eventually, like, people want to know, because the way America works is we want everything yesterday. So it's like, when are the government going to tell us? Like, what difference does it make? It's like the dog. Catch the car. What are you going to do? That's what Walker said to us. So when you figure this out, what are you going to do with it? And it's like people go, I don't know. It's like it's 8.25 second attention span. We just go to the next Twitter story. Yeah, it's cool. It's closed, and we just go on. And that's what we're doing. We're just flipping through, and we think that we want more stuff. Because 100 years ago, what they were doing is the rich people would go and have seances and talk to dead people. Now it's like, let's go do a CE5. We got 2 cars, we got a house, the kids are going through college. We need something entertainment. Let's go. Hey, some spiritual stuff. Let's go and looking for UFOs. And that's what we're doing. Most people are doing it just out of curiosity. They're really not really too worried about it. and that's where they're doing this stuff to get the people to talk about it and to change the consciousness of the world. And it has worked, because it's a completely different world. People told me, I remember used to tell Steve Bassett, like, you're crazy, man. There's no way they're going to disclose this thing. Not a chance. I never believed that what happened in 2017 would happen. And I wrote an article called The 64 Reasons They Decided Not to Tell You the Truth. And it was the whole thing was Stephen Greer said the stock market's going to melt down, oil's going to be not worth anything, people are going to jump off bridges. And of course, in 2017, they climatized people. They've been disclosing this stuff little bits at a time all the way through. And in 2017, suddenly New York Times says, oh yeah, the government is investigating UFOs. What happened? Absolutely nothing. Nobody jumped off a bridge. The stock market didn't collapse. Everybody went, yeah, I know that already. Okay, let's get on to the next thing. And that's what they're doing. They move you to a spot, and then everybody gets to that spot, and then they move to the next spot. But the key bottom line is they're moving you away from this physical world into this spiritual world, or the consciousness world, simulated universe, whatever you want to call it, that it's all Maya. It's all illusion. It's all vibration. And we got to take responsibility that we are the ones that are creating the heaven and the earth. It's not like God creates us and then puts the spirit in there. It's all made out of consciousness, and we're creating it. So you got an idea, and this person's got an idea, and it all loops in, and the world gets more complex, and all these new ideas, and it just gets bigger. And God just sitting in the back and just going, oh, this is pretty cool, man. Well, because if there's no up and down, God doesn't know who he is. So it's this idea that all these people are having these little shows and these little movies and running these little things, and God is sitting in the background and watching this. As the world gets more and more complex. It doesn't begin, it doesn't end, but it's a singularity, not of matter, but of consciousness.
Agreed.
That's just my guess. I may be totally wrong, but I've a lot of the stuff, as I said, Lakatsky has confirmed a number of things that I've been saying for a long time. I couldn't believe when I was listening to him and go, oh, like he confirmed that shadow people are real. And then they're going, shadow people are real. And this is the whole idea. And he said, what did he say? He said, the shadow people are real. There's real shadow people on their side. but he said they're using reverse psychology. He said they're not trying to stop you from looking at the phenomena, they're trying to drag you in. That's called the theory of wow. They go, wow, they see that woman, she came to the house and she had her wig on sideways. It was so weird. She wanted to do a poll. And that was one of these men in black. I met one of these men in black. It's so weird. And that's what they're doing. They're dragging you in. They're not trying to get you to do it. And when he said they're using reverse psychology, I said, that's called the theory of wow. They want you to go, wow, what the hell's going on? And drag you into the phenomena. And so a lot of the stuff, where it's physical and psychic phenomena. I had said that since 2012, and I was just, and the sightings all being different, and all this sort of stuff, and I'm going like, wow. I mean, I felt a lot closer to the answer than because to me it's all guesses, but when he started to confirm this, I'm going like, wow. It was like all this stuff is paid off. It actually, the stuff I was given by experiencers actually is real, that we are moving along, and they know. And the other one he said was, you hear this thing about the evil aliens. And I fight with people all the time about the evil aliens. Come on, this is nonsense. And he said, no. I said, I don't think there's any threat. He said, maybe my religious background, but I think I'm positive about this. And I've been saying that for a long time, that people are just trying to sell it. It's the weapons of mass destruction thing. We need an enemy. And unless you have an enemy, you're not going to get any money. And because if you go to Congress and say, oh, we're interested in UFOs, we'd like to, investigate UFOs, they'll go, get out and don't let the door hit you on the rear end on the way out. But if you go in there and say, oh, they're going to eat you and they're going to eat your kids and they're going to blow up the world and they're all this kind of stuff, then it goes, how much money do you want? How much money do you want? Because they want you to be a little 3-year-old kid hanging onto your mother's dress. That's what they want.
Exactly. And that's reminiscent of Werner von Braun on his deathbed. He told his doctorate level secretary, hey, one of the things that the government might do is they'll stage a fake alien invasion in order to effectuate this one world government.
Exactly.
And Reagan also said that at the UN assembly, that, hey, I can't imagine another situation where humanity wouldn't unite unless faced with some kind of external outside threat.
But his was important because he had the oneness concept, how the world would unite if we were faced with a threat from an alien race. We'd all realize we're just God's children. Dead on. He got briefed. That is how it works. It's the whole idea. How our problems are in separation. I always say, the expression I always use is, everything that is considered to be evil in the modern world is created by one thing and one thing only: the mistaken belief in separation. Once you get the idea of the separation, we're all one, we're all together, all the evil goes away. Evil is the idea that I'm a good guy, you're a bad guy. I need to kill you, I can demote you, I can treat you differently and stuff like that. And so Reagan came up with this thing about the oneness thing. That is absolutely, to me, is a key message that they're having. The oneness message, oneness versus separation. That is the number one. That's why I posted today. I said, I sort of indirectly basically said, okay, there's been disclosure that there's UFOs are real. Okay, now why are they here? And it was basically, I was going to say, what's the message? That's the bottom line, is what is the message? Why are they here? Why did this happen in 1947? What's actually going on here? And what's the bottom line? And you can take the fear aspect, but Reagan did the thing about how we'd all realize we're just God's children. That's exactly the idea, that all the evil goes away. We'd all unite. We'd all work together. And that's where the United States became the greatest country in the world, is because it was united. It's like, even if you've seen the original coin from the 13 states, they were all linked. They had these little circles around the coin, and they're all linked together. It was the idea, we're united, we're stronger than when we're divided. And once you start getting divided, you get blue states and red states and Republicans and Democrats and you have people fighting inside their own party and stuff like that. It just gets more separation. That's why I'm always hesitant on this idea that there's going to be some kumbaya announcement, the aliens are going to tell us stuff. I just can't see it. It's, to me, I see what I get, the vision I got was just horrendous, like turned it off. I can't take it. It was sort of like division. So I'm not sure what's going to happen, but there is, John Ramirez confirmed to me, I asked him, he's the high level CIA guy. Did you hear this story about this movement that the White House is going to make some sort of announcement between spring and summer of next year? Now, I'm not sure what that announcement is going to be. But let's see where it goes. And in the end, it doesn't really matter what the announcement is,
Right.
because whatever happens is we're going to have to live with whatever it is. And you learn from your lessons, and quit playing the victim, and realize that even if you're not, if you didn't choose it, if you believe that you chose every event in your life, you will get farther ahead, because every psychologist knows that until you admit that you got a problem, you're not going anywhere.
Yep.
It's when you admit and you take responsibility and quit playing the victim, that's when you can move ahead. And that's what this is all about, is we have to quit playing the victim and realize that we're part of this thing, do what we can, and life goes on forever. As I said, if reincarnation is fact, then we're going to realize this was a dream, and in the next lifetime it's going to be a forgotten dream. So don't get too hung up about it. It's all about lessons. It's going into this one, that world, learn this lesson, and the world gets more complex, and we just circle in and out, circle in and out. We get so tied up in this one little life, and we believe it's got to be this, it's got to be that, and we're trying to play to win and stuff like that. And we don't realize when it's all over, you're going to look back and go like, holy cow, that was a pretty interesting life. I didn't think I was going to die that way. And you realize that it's a puppet. Because you played King Henry VIII on grade 12 play doesn't mean you're King Henry VIII. You are just a puppet. You're playing a puppet. Your real self is outside. It's these etheric beings that appeared at Mount Shasta, by as many trees as was trees in the forest. These etheric beings, we're all etheric beings. We're all playing this thing. And as my friend, if you ever interviewed him, you should interview him. Yossi Ronan. I helped publish his book. It was a best-selling book. It's called One. That's the message. He's an Israeli experiencer, and I used to use his quote on my email every time I send out an email, and it said, "When we come into your world, we have to take on a body. We can take on whatever. We don't need a body, but we have to take on a body to work in the world. You can do the same thing. You just don't realize it." And that's when you realize that these beings can come in, they can appear as whatever they want, and it's all a thing that they're coming in to do something, and that we can do the same thing. And we got to realize we are the same as them. There's no them and us. We're all just these etheric beings, all sparks of the divine, all creating the universe out of consciousness. As Deepak Chopra says, he's the closest, I think, to anybody that I've ever heard. Everything is an activity inside consciousness. And if you keep that in your mind and think about it, I think you start to see the way the world actually works. Everything is an activity inside consciousness. Nothing gets behind consciousness. The quantum physics guy said it's primary. Nothing gets behind consciousness. You simply cannot have a world without consciousness. Consciousness is primary, which creates the physical world. And that's the way I think it works. And quantum physics and ufology are both heading in the same direction, making the same sort of discoveries. It's not the world it was 100 years ago. And 100 years from now, we're gonna think the stuff we believe today were totally nuts. People believe that stuff. We're moving along at a pretty high clip in terms of learning stuff. But it's bottom line is oneness, and this idea that it's not the physical world you think it is. It's much more complex than that.
I couldn't agree more. I think materialist science is slowly dying.
Yeah. It just, so it's like in doing an interview with the guy with the post-materialist manifesto. What was the word he used for it? Hang on, I gotta give you this one, because I never heard it before. Ideological trance. He talks about materialism. It's an ideological trance, and that's true. It's you get wrapped into this, and if you're a professor, nobody wants. That's why I said the people, they say, oh, the people, when they disclose it's religious people, are going to freak out. So no, it's not. It's going to be the scientific people. It's like, can you believe everything that you believed was wrong? If Feynman, it's like Max Planck says, science advances one funeral at a time. It does not advance because you convince your opponent you're right. It advances because your opponents die. And so I always, sometimes I'd play this clip if you've ever seen it. Look it up. Richard Feynman, who's considered to be one of maybe the smartest guy in the 20th century. He's at Cornell University, and he said, "Because I'm a scientist, I understand flying saucers. There are no flying saucers." And then I play the clip, and then I say, Richard Feynman's dead and science has advanced. That's how it works. Like you get this stuff where people were saying absolutely not in 1947. Nobody even thought about aliens in 1947. Now look where we've come since 1947 in terms of our understanding of how the world works. I mentioned people think the world's always been the same. I say, do you realize that there was a major debate? People talk about the evolution debate, the trial thing. There was a second big debate, and it was in 1920, and it was between Hubble and what was the other guy's name? They're arguing about, is there more than one galaxy? And the guy Shapley was the head of the astronomy at Harvard, and he said, no, there's only one galaxy. What you're seeing are just clouds of dust inside the Milky Way. There's only one galaxy. And the other guy was arguing, said, no, there's more than one galaxy. There's all these different galaxies, and we're at the center of this galaxy. So they were both dead wrong. And so 100 years ago, when this theory of relativity, we didn't even have the uncertainty principle or any of that kind of stuff explained then. All these guys, Einstein and the boys, all believe there's only one galaxy. And you got to realize we're just living with ideas that are going to change. And
Right.
the idea that matter is 99.99999% space was only discovered in 1911. Before then, everybody thought the atom was solid. And that's when you start to realize, like, we think we've got it all figured out. And in the end, we just got this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. And the phenomena, whatever it is, I call it the intelligence. The intelligence is moving us along with these little breadcrumbs. And you and I are at the leading edge of this. We're getting more breadcrumbs than the average person. And they want us to tell the story. Even like, if you ever interviewed Sherry Wild, I don't know if she still does interviews, but Sherry was the one that asked Da, are you actually an alien? And they would say to her, Sherry, why do you always give us a hard time when we abduct you? You're always giving us a hard time. She said, well, you always block my memory out. You scare me. Every time I can't remember. And they said, Sherry, have you forgotten the promise that you made? And her book is called The Forgotten Promise, that she agreed to come in and do this. And she's always been upset. She's very she's got a tendency towards depression and stuff like that. And she even told him, now I'm going to commit suicide and stuff like this. She couldn't handle it. She thought this was absolutely horrible. And she said she's sitting at her computer one day, and this is what they want. They want you and I and everybody to go and tell the message. She said, I'm sitting at my computer, and she's a real estate agent in a small town in Wisconsin, and her daughters are real estate agents as well. And they took out an injunction to stop her from publishing her book, because it's like, no, Mom, you're not going to, this is our business. This is a small town. You're not going to go and say you're abducted by aliens and stuff like that. And she actually got the book out. But what happened was, she was sitting at her computer one day, and she said, I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the computer, and the Word program is open. And I look at the Word program and I go, what's the Word program? I never use the Word program. What's going on here? And she starts reading it. Go, oh no, we're not going there. No way, no way. And it's her story. It's 3.5 pages of her story. And then she reads it. She goes, yeah, that's actually pretty good. But I'm not doing, no. And then Daw comes, and Daw says, yeah, timing is everything, Sherry. Timing is everything. You should do it. You got to do it. And she said, I'm not writing your damn book. No, I am writing your damn book. And she said they kept pushing. She said, okay. So she wrote the book, and then she got it published. And then I say, Sherry, tell me the story about the screen in the car. So she says, driving along, and she says, all of a sudden there's 3D screen in the car. She's looking, it's like, what are you doing? I'm driving. I can't be looking at a screen. And then the screen is there, and she's looking at it, and it's her as a little tiny girl around this tree, and she's talking to the tree. It's something about she knew the tree, and she talked to the tree, and she'd be around this tree all the time, and she's with the tree, and she's going, oh, that's really nice. What's that for? And they said, Sherry, that's the first scene to your movie. Now she's in Hollywood trying to get this movie made. And that's the thing, you see this over and over again. I'll say to people when they wrote the book, you wrote the book, hey, did they tell you to write the book? And they go, yeah, they told me. Or they'll say, yeah, I think so. Did you get any help writing the book? Yeah, they helped me. And that's the thing, you see this idea. That's what we're here. They drag you down the rabbit hole, and then they want you to tell the story, because that's what raises consciousness. When people start talking about, everybody's talking about the story, and then you get 2017, when they suddenly say the government's investigating UFOs, and everything's okay. It's all cool because everybody's the consciousness has been raised. If you did that in 1947, you may have gotten people freaking out. But after people see all the stories and say, I don't believe it. No, I don't believe in this crap. CIA is putting stuff in movies and stuff like that, and it just slowly acclimatizes people to say, I don't believe it, and then suddenly it comes and say, yeah, okay, I knew it was real, And the idea that even the Brookings report in 1960 said, if you realize that you've been in a higher civilization has encountered you, you have to slowly acclimatize the people, because the lower civilization, if you don't, will disappear.
Yeah.
And that's an official government report. So
I do remember reading that report, and it's reminiscent because we are in the midst of a significant paradigm shift. The Catholic Church recently, they formed this panel of leading thinkers and discussed how they could best tell their congregation that, hey, there could be other life out there and God created all kinds of different life. So, I thought that was pretty radical for them to
Yeah.
even consider and
But
put out there.
they added the thing that they'll be able to baptize them. So
Oh yeah,
Oh, that's right.
I remember that.
yeah, they've handled it pretty good, the Roman Catholic Church, in terms of handling the thing. I mean, I'm not sure about the other religions, but I don't think it's really going to inflict. In fact, I've got a meeting next Monday with a bunch of ministers who ask all these questions, and I keep going, and they're still on the ET thing, like ET, and I say, no, I think this is religious. I think this is God. You guys should catch on to this. It's like, and then they come back with more ET questions. I'm going, no, I don't. This is different. This is not. You guys should be very interested in this, but they have this very sort of firm idea that there's us here, and then there's the ETs, and Jesus saved us, and who saves the aliens and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's all very interesting. I find it a little overwhelming at times, because I sort of get into it, and then your brain's going over and over, and your stomach is churning, whatever. But I feel honored that I got to play this game. I mean, I could consider, next lifetime, I may be a refugee running around the world looking for a place to call home, and nobody wants you, and everybody's got borders to block you out and stuff like that. And maybe I'll be a refugee next time, and whatever it is I'm going to be. But this time I got to play in the Super Bowl, and I'm gonna take it for what it's worth, because you never know what's going to happen next time. I don't think I can have two lifetimes to be this lucky, because I did a lot of stuff with psilocybin. I wrote a book on psilocybin.
I was going to ask you about that.
I've done a bunch of things since. That's probably the best very high dose psilocybin, where I get I can actually interact with whatever's running the show. But
So you've taken the quintessential heroic dose as Terence
every time.
McKenna. Wow.
Every
And do you ascribe to the notion that Terence McKenna believed that the NHI life or alien life is actually in the mushroom?
I don't know if he did. I think that's more the DMT thing, where Strassman was doing the DMT thing, where he was asking these people, have you been abducted? And they go, no, I don't think so. And he's like 50% had been abducted. I remember one guy, his name's Chase Williams. He's the guy that leaked the Wilson leak document for me on the internet. I didn't know what to do with it. And he said, leave it to me. And then he phones me from Chicago. He says, you know that document you gave me? I think it's on the internet. It's like, and it was like, now it's read into Congress and stuff like that. But anyway, at one point he phones me up and he says, hey, I did a session last night. He said, I had a classic abduction experience. I said, you did? He said, yeah, it was a classic abduction experience. He says, I was on a table. He says, and the beings were there. He said, I couldn't see their heads, but I could see their arms, and the beings, and they're working on my head. They were operating on my head. And I go, that's weird. And so you get the thing. I've never really had the way they show it to me. Like, I've had the last 3 sessions, I've had the thing where they show me how the universe actually works. And I remember the first time and you got to remember with these doses is that it's very hard to bring the stuff back, because once that filter starts to shut, it's just the main message. They let you have the main message you bring back. The rest of it you don't remember. And but the one that I did actually last or earlier today, it was very clear. I could see exactly how consciousness operated, and it didn't really surprise me. And they were saying to me, "You're swimming upstream," and I could actually see it. It's like, oh, that's why I'm having such a hard time here. It's like overdone. And I, even in not the dead people, but my mother had just died, and before she died, I always said, oh, this is my opportunity, because my father had his father come to him before he died. And I started with near-death experience. I started with a study at university in the 70s with people who were dying in hospitals. And I went and see all the weird things. People predict their deaths. There's people come to take people over near-death experience. That's when it started, 1975, the first near-death experience book. So when my mother was dying, I said, Mom, and she wasn't really, I don't know if she could hear me, or she was not paying attention. She was pretty stressed out about what was going on. Eyes were closed. And I said, Mom, you got to send me a message, Mom. Send me a message. And then I'm waiting. And then when she died, I was there holding her hand when she died. And I sort of forgot to look, and I was very depressed. And so then I did psilocybin, because psilocybin will take depression. There's absolutely no doubt about it. You do 5 grams. If you're depressed, you will not be depressed when it's all over. It's like unbelievable success ratio. And it goes on for a period of time. So I did it, and then her essence appeared. But I'm the only one. That's the only one I can remember of people doing psilocybin where they met dead people. And then the second one was kind of weird. Like Christian was talking about this thing where you see a symbol and it doesn't make any sense to you. This is what it was. So I'm there, and there's nothing to do with my mother. Just sitting there. All of a sudden, I see this little. It's like an address label. It's so funny. It was like an address label where you have the 3 lines, but it was one line. It was just one line. It was like an extended address label, and it went Lenora Cameron 445 Hudson. And I went, Lenora Cameron 445 Hudson. What the hell's going on? And then I read it. I go, Lenora Cameron 445 Hudson. I go, oh, hi, Mom. And then that just it disappeared. And what it was this inside symbol that my mother was very conservative. She used to say, those damn women should get out of politics. They should just stay home and take care of their kids. Like, this world's gone crazy and stuff like that. And she was really, really conservative. And so my mother, we bought this house where I'm in now, 1959, and my mother lived in it till she died a couple months ago. And so her thing was, she was a stay-home mother. She never worked. She did her job. She was a good and faithful servant. She was very Christian, good and faithful servant. She stayed home and raised her kids. So that was her business card. Lenora Cameron, 445 Hudson Street. And it made
That's
sense
amazing.
to me. It's like, oh, that's what it's about. And you get these sort of messages. So
That's how they communicate.
but in terms of understanding, I've got the thing, and it doesn't really surprise me. It's like this idea that you can, when people say they understood everything, I could see exactly how what I was thinking was causing my problems, and it was like a flow. I remember it was like a flowing river, all this stuff, and and all these things were happening, and it was just fascinating, but very, very traumatic. When I had this experience earlier today, was this idea that I said, shut it off. I can't, no. It was almost like suicidal. I can't take it. Let me out of this. No, I can't do this. It was just unbelievable. Whatever is coming had this sort of very negative sort of thing, like, and I may have confused it with my own life. My own life is a mess, but if it wasn't my life, I was getting some sort of symbol that a storm is a coming, and it doesn't really mean it's going to be a bad thing. It's going to be you sow what you reap. So it's going to be a different world with a lot more stress than it is right now. So it's it's just going to be a world where your lessons are a little bit tougher. It's more like you're a refugee, or
is this something that we will experience in our lifetimes?
Well, this is right away. I mean, this
on the corner.
It appeared like this is about to happen, but there was no details. It's not like it's not a noun thing where this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. I'm seeing buildings fall, nothing like that. It was just because if you've done high dose psilocybin, what happens is your emotion goes to 10, and everything is super high emotion. It's just so intense. And so what it was this feeling of darkness, of imminent pain and stuff like that, whatever. But it was a sense of it was alive. It was just, and I was just like, I can't take it. No, stop. It's like, and it doesn't stop. It's just turn it up a little bit more and more, and it's pushing this stuff. And then I knew they would get me out of it. So when I had enough, after 3.5 hours, I actually took the headset off, and I said, okay, there's going into this German type classical music. I'm going, no, I've had enough of this, because you follow the music. And I go, no, I've had enough of that. But it was the darkest session I've ever had. And I've had sessions where I actually believed I was in hell. And one of the big lessons, if you're into, I don't know if you've done the high dose stuff, but when I wrote the beginning of the book, the first page of the book, key lesson that I learned in doing all high dose stuff is surrender is the rule. Believe me, surrender is the only rule. And it was this idea where they put you in this situation, almost like the ego. They would always tell me this thing about ego. They would say, you think you know everything, you haven't got, and they would swear, you haven't got an effing clue what's going on, and stuff like that. And they would keep hammering me with this ego thing all the time. And so when I was doing this one earlier today. It was again this idea that the ego gets in the way, that it takes you, it breaks you apart, and it would put me in these situations earlier, in these situations where it was like hell. There's no other way to describe it. And then I would say, oh, terrible. This it's going to go on forever. And they would always make you think it's going to go on forever. I'd say, it's going to go on forever. That guy, oh my. And then I'd go, okay, I took the drug. Okay, this is the way it's going to be. I'm going to live in this hell forever. And it's like, boom, gone. And suddenly you're in nirvana. You're in this thing. And once you surrendered, and then I'd say, okay, I know they do that. Especially there was this one type of mushroom. They would do it every time. And I said, okay, next time I'm going to know. It's only going to last for a couple minutes. Just surrender and get out of it. And they would fool you again. It would be like, and you'd be freaking out, no, get me out of here, and stuff like this. And they go, oh, I surrendered. And then if it stopped again, you go, oh shoot, I fell for it again. They did it again. If it's just, it's like you're dealing with an intelligence that knows exactly what it's doing. It knows exactly how to run through. There would be that one scenario, and then the next scenario would come in, and it would go through, and then I come out and I feel great. It's like the depression's all gone. I'm a lot of anxiety. Like I'm always trying to figure things out and worrying about stuff, and all of it's gone. And it's like, wow, it's just like, but it's tough. Every time I go, like, I'm so scared to do it because I know what it's like. It just is. It's there's no words. I go in and I go, I'm never gonna do this.
I've been trying to convince my girlfriend.
Ego death is a very scary thing in terms of the experiential aspect of psychotropics and psychedelics.
It doesn't fool around, and that's what I think with the UFO phenomenon as well. It does not fool around. It is neutral. It doesn't care. It's going to do what it's going to do because everything is just experience. And so you may have something that's very, very negative that you're experiencing. It doesn't care. Let me assure you, it doesn't care. And that's where people say, oh, this person got injured or whatever. And it's all part of the system. And it's like, you want to hunt the skinwalker? Yeah, we can play that game. I play that game. And it doesn't care. It's neutral. It will take you down. If you decide you're going to take it on, get ready to pick yourself up off the ground or be dead. It's just very neutral. It's reactive to whatever you think. And that's what the key thing is. We are part of what's happening around us. This is not some independent phenomena that's happening to us. We are part of the phenomena, at least part of the phenomena. We may be the whole thing that's behind this whole thing. And teaching ourselves lessons to raise it up and play these little games. And next time we're going to go into the world and we're going to play this game and we're going to pretend we're this and we're going to pretend that, and we just take on a different puppet. And this is the puppet we've got. And we're just playing this little game, especially if you realize that in the end, your essence is going to stay apart, and that you are not your voice. You're not what's in your head. You are watching the play, and you get wrapped up in the little puppet, and you actually start to believe you're the puppet, and we're not the puppet. We're just playing on the stage. All the world's a stage. All the men and women and aliens are but actors. They have their entrance and exit, and each man plays many roles.
Yeah, and they cover some of that too. They especially the psilocybin stuff. They have a show on Netflix I was showing my girlfriend, and it's called How to Change Your Mind, and it's really good. And they would give these doses to patients who were dying, like people who were dying and they were afraid, they had anxiety. And they're like, oh my God, my PTSD, my OCD, like my fear of death, like all of that it just changed their perspectives. And I think that's truly going to revolutionize like the medical stuff too, and not just psilocybin, but like when we kind of incorporate the spirituality aspect with energies, chakra, Reiki, that kind of stuff, it's going to change the game.
Yeah, well, that's where I said at one point I was saying that I think disclosure may come from psychedelics. There may be disclosure of the world, because what's happened is the UFO field has no money in it. So, but psychedelics, as soon as they realized that you'd have 80% of people on cocaine, heroin addiction, cigarette smoking, depression, gone with 1 5-gram session in a lab, and it would last for years. Suddenly, everybody started to patent everything that moved. There's billions. There's 200 new companies that have formed, and everybody's trying to make money because they're trying to get this whole therapy thing that you can make money from this. And that's what happens is, so you start getting millions and millions and millions of people undergoing this stuff. And they say, well, we're going to cure people and we're going to make money from all the therapy and all this kind of stuff and the drugs and stuff like that. But what's happening is while you're doing it, all these people are telling stories of what happened when they were in the experience. And that's where you start to realize this consciousness thing. It's not this world where people are engaging, an entity, not an entity, but mine's always, there's something there that's running the show, but it doesn't really announce itself or whatever. I just know, I know what it's saying and stuff like that. And that's the thing, is that in the psychedelics is there's so many stories out there, and that's ripping apart the worldview of how the world works. When these people start telling these stories, people go, they can't be making this stuff. They got to be telling the truth. And that's what surprised me. Like the guy that actually did the psilocybin, Roland Griffiths, just died. And I remember I heard the interview he did just before he died, and I was like, because they asked him, said, well, because he was 4th stage colon cancer, he was diagnosed, and he was terminal. And then they said, well, did you do psilocybin? And he said, no, I didn't. I did LSD. And I talked to the cancer, and I said to the cancer, am I going to die? And the cancer said exactly what people say when you start getting near-death experience and experiencers and stuff like that. I did all these people, and they would say they had this experience where there was no time and space, and everything was perfect. Everything is exactly what it's supposed to be. Nothing's wrong. Everything's exactly what it's supposed to be. And he had this experience where the cancer said, no, you're going to die, but it's okay. It's the way it's supposed to be. Everything's okay. And then he said, well, if I'm supposed to die, and I got this message, maybe you can give me a couple more years. And he said there was radio silence. So they asked him, they said, well, what do you think when you die? Is life after death? And I couldn't believe what he said. He said, I think it's as close to zero as you could possibly get. And I'm going, really? You're the guy that did this John Hopkins thing with the dying cancer patients, and they told you all these stories, and then you come, but he's a scientist. I'm a skeptical scientist. He said, I'm a skeptical scientist. So he's got to play the game. Oh, I'm a skeptical scientist. I really don't believe in life after death and stuff like that. I was thinking, first thing I thought is like, man, did they give you some bad LSD, expired LSD? Like, what the hell? Where'd you get that from? It's like, come on. He's like, there's no way. If you think that the world is a physical world, there's all you have to do is take 5 grams of psilocybin, mushrooms, buckle your seatbelt. Your world is about to come apart. You not see the world the same way. I absolutely guarantee you can think whatever you want. But I couldn't believe it. It's like, wow. And that's the thing with the psychedelics, is people realize, wow, the world is, something's going on here. Like, and the message gets across, same as the experience is running out, everybody's telling stories, and the zeitgeist raises, the consciousness raises, and eventually everybody figures it out, and we move on, and we come up with another thing to worry about.
Awesome. And there is a neurological change. I think it's called neuroplasticity with respect to these psychotropics and their therapeutic benefit to the brain. I mean, they've been looking at ketamine. There's a well-known university that's actually objectively trying to map the DMT realm by using a slow drip process to some of these brave psychonauts who are reporting the same kinds of things whenever they enter into this altered state of consciousness. So, it definitely begs the question. And when we look historically at the record, when it comes to different cultures and different civilizations that have used mind-altering substances to communicate with the divine, it's apparent that even our ancestors knew that with respect to consciousness, there are different levels and degrees of perception of what reality could very well be.
Yeah, the Eastern religions had it figured out 5,000 years ago. We're reinventing. We thought they were stupid because they couldn't build a cell phone, but they had this all sort of figured out. The interesting thing I've found with the DMT is it backs up the same thing with the UFO experiences, where they say time and space. Is there actually time and space? If there's no time and space, then how big is the universe? And you get these guys. The one guy, I remember the story was, he was like, it's 10 minutes for DMT. The guy was gone for 2,500 years. He built this forest on the side of a mountain. He was gone for 2,500 years. He's gone 10 minutes. And Chris Bledsoe said the same thing when he told me about, he was gone for 4 hours. He said, Grant, it was like 4 months. Like I was gone for 4 months. And this is the whole idea. And that's the key, is the bottom line is, if this is true, if there's no time and space, then what the hell's going on? We have no clue. It may just be a spot, a singularity in of consciousness here, and that it's all just unravels from there. It's all here. It's all now. There's no time. There's no space. It's and that's where we're going in terms of these worldviews being shattered, and whether it's DMT or experiences, near-death experiences, same thing, where people talk about, you know, the fact there's no time and space, and yet all the experiences are different. Same as out-of-body experiences. All the experiences are different. There's a common bottom line to the story, but when you get down to it, you have this individual aspect. Like when you have a dream, it's your individual aspect, and that's where I'm trying to impress upon people, maybe I'm wrong, is this idea that what you're seeing in the UFO field is like a dream. You're playing part of that role. What you're seeing is being in some ways caused by you. And people say, no, it's this evil aliens. They're evil aliens, and we're victims, and we get some money, and we get some weapons, and we're going to shoot them down and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, good luck. I mean, I think that they're running the show, and as Jim Semivan said, there's no, it appears to be something beyond our science that we can't handle, and we don't understand. And there's a guy who got the briefing. So if you want to know what does the government actually know, Jim Semivan was the equivalent of a 2-star general inside the CIA. He was the real deal. He was a big, huge name there. He's the guy that was behind the disclosure in 2017 with the New York Times. And when you listen to him, you go like, no, he's not making up. And he says he had the experience and stuff like that. And so people say, oh, it's bad. People got abducted. And I said, just remember one thing about abduction. If Jim Semivan had not been abducted, had those beings in his room, there would be no disclosure. Do you think he would have disclosed, gone to the government and said, we're going to drop this thing and give the story to Lou Elizondo and put it in the New York Times if he had not had an experience? That's what they want. They give you the experience, this bizarre experience, and everybody goes out and they start changing the world. They start doing stuff and they start moving the message, and that's what's happening. If you take a look, Eric Davis is an experiencer. He's one of the key guys. I mean, he had a big UFO sighting the day he got his PhD. Jack Sarfati is an experiencer. You go through the whole list, they're all experiencers.
Jack Sarfati, he got that telephone call as a kid.
Yeah.
And he was he was given this download, and now look, he's coming up with these incredible theories as to how the Tic Tac operates in warp space-time.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that's where I did my book. The book inspired the paranormal world of creativity. I go through all the inventions and all the music. How many UFO people are experienced, or musicians are experiencers, and they can't read music, because reading music is a left brain thing. Musicians are very right brained. The UFO phenomenon is right brained. It's the same as psychedelics. Shuts down the default mode network. Your left brain shuts down. You go into the field with the right brain, the female brain. You tap into the universe, and when you come back out, as I know, when you're doing the high dose, all this stuff's going to disappear. It's like a valve. It's like when you wake up with a dream and you say, I'm going to remember that dream, and it's like, oh no, and it's like water going down a toilet. No, I want to remember. No,
that happened to me with the deja vu.
The left brain comes online. It says, oh, Christian's waking up. He's waking up. Okay, let's go. And the filter shuts, and you leave all that stuff behind. That's the problem with high dose. You're so far in the field, it's very hard to bring stuff back in, because it's so far in the field. But we're starting to learn. I mean, that's the contact modality thing, where we're starting to learn this. And I showed with the inventions and stuff like that, all these inventions, the laser, the hologram, they're both guys sitting on a park bench. They worked on the problem, they couldn't figure it out, and then sitting on a park bench, relaxing, all of a sudden, boom, it pops into their head, and off they go. And that's the way it is. You got to learn to quiet the mind. You can work through all the problems, but it's in the quiet of the mind, in the meditation, when you shut down that left brain, the little voice that's talking, that's creating the noise. Once you can shut down the left brain, and you can pick up the signal. There's no noise anymore. You can pick up the signal. Everybody can pick up the signal, and it's a matter of learning. And so when you bring out your stuff and I bring out my stuff, people go and try it, and then they learn a little bit and they pick up a little bit. And as we go along, it's one step at a time, and we move along, and the world gets to be a bigger and a more magnificent and more complex world. And that's the way it's supposed to work. It's not about getting to the end and getting disclosure. It's about us doing what we're supposed to do and enjoying the fact that we got to play in this game. We are part of this magnificent universe when we could have been nothing. We got to play the role and appreciate it. So
I like that, Mr. Cameron. And Christian, do you have any last parting thoughts for our esteemed and distinguished guests, who totally blew my mind and allowed me to kind of see things from this different perspective that I've never really considered ever. You know,
Yeah,
oh my
it's
goodness, this is heavy.
yeah, I wasn't expecting it either, and I knew about you, Grant, but I'm glad to actually be able to open up and share these things because you understand. And a lot of what you mentioned is like I do a lot of reading. The New Science of Consciousness Survival, there's like all my notes, and then a
Wow.
lot of other books that I have that explain exactly what you said. And I think you're absolutely correct. We need to talk about it more because otherwise it's just we're left with the phenomena, which doesn't really give us any answers. And it doesn't, I don't think it'll bring us any closer to the overall truth, but it's something that it's bringing us towards. So I'm grateful that there's someone like you out there also sharing that message. So I appreciate
And
that.
on
Thank you.
that note, Christian, Mr. Cameron, I have to just ask you this really briefly. You know, I had my initial experience this past June doing a variation of CE5. You know, at first I thought transcendental meditation was for hippies. I thought it was for New Agers.
Yeah.
I dismissed it for years, human initiated contact, until one day I decided, hey, might as well give it a try.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, I did some transcendental contact protocols and I saw what was behind the veil. And let me tell the audience out there, this stuff actually, it works. And you know what? There's no going back. And ever since then, Mr. Cameron, since I had my initial experience this past June, it hasn't stopped. I'm perceiving a lot more different things that weren't there before, that I've never seen in my life, that I've never considered. Downloads, insights, shadow people, and I'm sure you can relate. It doesn't stop, does it, Mr. Cameron?
Yeah, that's the hitchhiker effect where people have it as a bad thing, but it is the idea that once you rip that filter and you open up and you see something, the filter stays open and other stuff starts to come in. It says, "Oh, this guy's ready to go. Dump this in, dump that," and that's what happens. Is it gets people will start even the idea where you take it home and your kids start to see it. And my father had a sighting. He was a pilot. And my son had a sighting, and you start to realize that it's taking every opportunity is to drop a breadcrumb. But you're right that once you have the experience, it you start having more experiences, and
Yep.
it accelerates, and then you have to be careful who you talk to because it can be very
I've
hard on
experienced that.
relationships.
Yep. I've
What do you
ruined
mean
a
be
few.
careful? What do you mean be careful who you talk to? What are you
Well, it's the idea like near-death experiences. The divorce rate for a person who has a near-death experience, after they have the near-death experience, 75 to 80% get divorced.
Yep.
Because that's all they can talk about. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, oh yeah. And then you're not the person I married. You quit talking about this. I don't want to hear. And that's the whole thing is most people aren't into it.
How
We're
is it that
very
you have an inside glimpse to my marriage? This ever since this past June, it's all I've been talking about. My wife looks at me like, "Wow, you've lost your marbles." I'm like, "No, I know what I've experienced and
yeah.
seen."
My
And
girlfriend's talked to me
irregardless of
about
how I
that.
articulate it to family and friends, they're like,
Yep.
"This is too much for me." But I
Yep.
know I've had that experience, Mr. Cameron.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
Same.
It's true, but
Yeah.
it's what Max Planck says: one funeral at a time.
Yep.
You're almost never going to convince anybody. I used to argue with, skeptics and whatever, and what you realize is that everybody's at whatever level they're at. So it's not like you're going to convince somebody unless they have the experience. So if you're married, somebody has an experience, then it's a different story. But after a while, it gets very tiresome to hear this story and people think you're insane or whatever. It's very hard on relationships. In
Yep.
it's and maybe that's the way it is. It's meant to be that way, but I don't really talk about it with my family. They're not against it, but they're really not interested. And I'm not going to convince. It's the idea where one funeral at a time. It moves along, and when they're ready to have their experience, they're going to have their experience. Just be glad that you had the experience and you share with. That's why if you see at conferences, I don't know if you've been to conferences where they have these experiencer groups that started. That's where I got the idea of the rabbit hole, where I'd bring on experiencers. Anybody's had an experience that they can't talk, so you can come on, turn your camera off, and turn and talk or whatever. Nobody knows who you are or whatever. And because you'd get these things at these big conferences where it'd have this event at 8 o'clock in the morning. So the speeches would begin at 9:30, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, the experiencers would all meet in the back room. and then they'd be out by 9 o'clock, and then the speeches would start at 9:30 because nobody knew who they were because they come. But those people, you go in there and people are crying, and they came across the country and they're hugging each other because that's their family. These are people who understand what they've been through. They're having the same sort of thing. And I remember the one time I was in there, I guess I'll leave this and we can shut it, maybe talk another time. I was in there, and this is this whole idea of the Super Bowl. And the one woman's talking about, oh, it's so tough, and man, those people don't care about us out there. They're just having their speeches. They don't care. We're in the back room here, and this is so tough being the experiencer. I say, hey, I'm one of the speakers. I'm in the room with you. Let me tell you what, you got to play this role. I mean, you got to be there. You're in like the Super Bowl of all stars, and you see these people are sort of sitting up in their chairs. It's like, yeah, and they suddenly realize like you lose perspective of the whole thing, that that they've had so much grief from their families. They just don't understand. And it's where I talk about Stanton Friedman. Stanton Friedman was a good friend of mine. Stanton Friedman for 61 years did UFOs, and he used to lecture with Seth Shotak and Class and Menzel and all these guys. He would argue with these guys, and he'd say, Grant, I was at Oxford University, and we had a big debate, and 80% of the audience think I won. It was like, but when he died, then I'm thinking like, who did he ever convince? He didn't convince anybody of anything. All these skeptics, yeah, people on the outside that were sitting there watching the debate, but it comes like down to politics. It's like two people watch the same speech and they see two different things. And you can say what party you're in, you know exactly what they're going to think. You get into these little things that you're really not going to. I think it's a waste of time to try to convince people.
Yeah,
you put it out there, like on what you guys are doing on the internet, and the people that are destined to see it will see it. And that you get these synchronicities where people, when it's their time to come, it's their time. So
your vibe attracts your tribe.
They're working on different things. They're working on whatever life lesson they're working on. This is the life lesson I got, and so I play it, and I don't do their thing. So I'm not really interested in what they're. I used to go to cocktail parties, and then they'd say, somebody know that you're into UFOs, and then they'd say, "Hey, Grant, what's going on with UFOs?" And then you'd say, "Oh," like me, I talk for forever. Because I start talking, and then about 5 minutes later, you look at everybody's on the other side of the room. Everybody's just moved off, and you're talking to the one person. And then they'd say, "Well, you got a problem. You just talk about this all the time. That's all you're obsessed with this sort of stuff." And then you go into the cocktail party, and then you just sit there quietly and listen to these people talk. And they're talking about somebody who isn't. It's always talking about somebody who isn't in the room. Tell me about your daughter, having a miscarriage or whatever, so I can have a story to tell my friends. And they're talking about people who aren't in the room. Mm-hmm. And then I'm sitting there listening to these conversations, and I'm going, "You people think I got a problem? I could not do this for 5 minutes. Talk about what you people are talking about. It's like unbelievable." But that's where they are. Everybody is where they are, and we have to. That's why I think where the internet came. I'm actually writing a book called The Gifts, where I talk about the invention of the internet, where this is like the collective unconscious. This is almost designed to be the collective unconscious. Everybody puts all their material into the middle, and people feed in, and they get material and stuff like that. That's I think is our main job, is not to convince people that this is real. It's to put out what we have discovered, and the people that if you figure a way to get a lot of viewers or work it that way, the message gets out, and the people that need to hear it will hear it. You'll have the synchronicities, and when people have their experience, they will move into the camp. It's you can't convince people. If you're a refugee, say in Ukraine or whatever, you're running for your life, that's the last thing you want to think about is UFOs. I mean, you're basically trying to survive or put your kid into soccer practice or whatever. People live their lives. So appreciate what you've got and realize it's a very high end thing. If you try to convince people, it can go really, really ugly. That they just don't. It's like they're just watching your lips move. They have no idea what you're talking about. So you got to. That's where your family is, the people that are in the UFO community, and to share what you've got. That's what the beings are telling us. Oneness message versus separation message, and you have to spread it. Or as Chris Bledsoe said when he met the lady in light, she said, "Chris, you have a burden, and it is yours to carry." Twice she pulled him because he stopped talking about it because he got obsessed. His wife put him in an insane asylum. She had him locked up. He was not allowed to talk to the kids. He was sitting in a room by himself for 9 months, praying to God to take him away. His life had come apart at the seams. He could not believe what had happened to him. And so you have this guy, and then he said he did a documentary, and they accused him of lying on the documentary, and then he said, "That's it, I'm never talking about this again." And for 5 years he didn't talk about anything. That's when the lady pulled him, and she said, "Chris, you have a burden that is yours to carry." And she pulled him twice because he still didn't talk about it. 6 months later she pulled him again. I said, "Chris, do you know what the burden is?" He said, "Yeah, I know what the burden is. The burden is the message." And that's this movie that's coming. I think it's going to be called The Message. That's his thing. It's the message from the lady that he was told he has to go out. And most people are like that. When you first have it, you say, "Oh, I want to keep my camera off when I'm talking about this. I don't want people to know I'm talking about it." And then once they get going, suddenly they're like messiahs. Like, "Oh, I got to tell everybody." It's like, and that's what happened to Chris. He didn't want to talk about it. And now you can't shut the guy up. I mean, because he suddenly realizes he's got this important message for the world. And you got to realize the same thing. You've got an important message. You've had an important experience. Put it out, but don't necessarily try to think that you're going to convince people. I've never really convinced anybody of anything and I've been at it for 48 years.
Yeah.
I've just sort of realized that's not really where it's at.
That's what I always
Well,
say.
Mr. Cameron, you haven't convinced me of anything, but you validated things for me. You validated these things that I've been holding near and dear to my heart since my initial experience. And to hear that confirmation from the likes of you, who has been in the field for decades, it's comforting, and it gives me strength knowing that we have people such as yourself that have dedicated their life's work and passion into uncovering the mystery of the phenomenon. For that, I'm eternally grateful. And as my kids grow up, I'm going to have them read your books. And for me, that's your legacy. That's your legacy that I'm going to make sure perpetuates through my family into the next generation.
I'm glad you guys have come, because there was always a joke. I mean, you guys haven't been around for that long, but I mean, there was always a joke. I remember doing a New Jersey conference where the woman came up and said to the guy, "Do you have a discount for seniors?" And he went, "Discount for seniors? We had a discount for seniors. Everybody get in at the discount." "No, we don't," because there's no young people. Now we have, since the 2017, you see a lot of people with podcasts and people that because I'm not techie. I have problems editing and putting books up and stuff like that. I used to have people to help me. I don't anymore. But that's the thing, is you have these people who are able, I call them the young guns, the young guys like you, the young guns who know how the internet works. They know how to get stuff out there and stuff like that. That's the new generation. So that's your role, is to work with the internet. And because there was no young people when we were doing it, and we said, well, who's going to take over? And after 2017, there's this explosion of young people who suddenly moved. And I think you guys are now the ones carrying the message, and you know the internet, you know how this thing works.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't. I'm not a techie person. I'm still in the book thing, and I'm always looking for help to edit and to figure out how to get stuff online and stuff like that. But the young people are gonna move this thing along, and that's the new generation. So that's if you did Dolores Cannon, the whole thing, the 3 waves. You have the 3 waves. The world's in a bad situation. 3 waves of people agree to come in, and you guys are in the 3rd wave. You're the one.
I have Dolores Cannon right in front of me.
There you go.
There you go. And that's inspired material. So she's getting this, and that's the thing. It's a contact modality. She taught people how to get in the field. They get the material and they give it to her, and she puts it in a book and puts it out, and eventually the material gets out. So that's what you guys are here to do, and hopefully we can work together on some stuff. And if you
Let's do it, Mr. Cameron.
Absolutely.
We'll talk more about spirituality and consciousness, and
Yes.
we'll schedule another part 2 with you. I'd love to continue this conversation.
I would too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for your
Thank you,
time
Mr.
and for
Cameron.
your interest.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Take
Okay.
care.
We'll talk to you again soon. Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste. All right, that ends the recording. That was awesome. My goodness, I'll send you the original file, Mr. Cameron.
There you
Like
go.
I'm almost moved to tears just like listening to you. Like I've read your work for like a decade, and I can't believe I'm like actually talking to somebody, that I held in such high esteem in this field, and it means so much, Mr. Cameron. It truly is an honor.
Yeah. Hopefully it's something moves you down. Something will, because you share it and you pick it up and you think about it, and you move it to the next step. So In fact, I'm at the point now where I'm just trying to record everything in books and somehow get the books out and put my files. I'm destroying all my files, my UFO files from the presidents and stuff like that. Then you know, because I realize, you know, I'm getting older, and this new generation is moved on, and I think we're over the hump now. I think 2017 was a big moment in ufology. Before that, it was a completely different world in terms of nobody believed the government knew anything and stuff. And so I wish you guys well. And if you got any questions, send them to me. We'll stay in touch. And
We will, Mr. Cameron. Oh my goodness,
Absolutely.
this is so awesome.
Thank you.
yeah, beautiful.
Thank you, sir. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Talk soon.
Bye, sir.
Bye.
Bye-bye.